Hello, hello. Mic testing 1, 2, 3. How is everyone doing? Let's open the chat. Beautiful, beautiful. Hope you all are doing good. Interesting session today. Should be simple, small boy stuff, basic stuff today. Nothing too complicated. Ram. Hello, 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 hello. Okay, bunch of highs. Let's wait for a few more people to join. Let's start at 7:02. Someone sent moi. Font big. I think you're saying I should increase the font on Replit. Few people said that. I will do that. Let me do that right now. Web3 roadmap. No audio. Is there audio? There's probably audio. Hello, hello. Mic testing. All right, good to go. Beautiful. All right, going to pause chat. So many mois. Okay. Keep the pace slow. So today's class would generally be, it's very high level, which is why, yeah, it'll be slow. It's very simple stuff. I know this from the last cohort because we've done this in the last cohort as well, and this was like fairly simple things. So shouldn't feel overwhelming until the very end is when we will code a little bit, which might feel overwhelming, but frankly, that will also be very simple, like 10 lines of code today. So if you know Express, feel free to skip. If you know backend, feel free to skip. If all of this is new for now, then should be an interesting class. Let me open Replit on my side, and it is 7:02. So I think we can get right into it. What do you guys say? Shall we start or should we talk a little bit? Alrighty, let's start. Get right into it. Share screen. 1 second. OBS recording start. And now share screen. There we go. Slides are here. Let me paste that in chat. So you guys can look at slides on your side as well. There are a few links in slides as well that will help you out. All right. Keynote slides for today. Oopsie daisy. Let's start from the top. There we go. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to week 2.2. So this is effectively our third learning class. And today we're diving right into backend and a little bit of this thing called HTTP. At a high level, we will understand the Node.js runtime. How is this different from the JavaScript that browsers run? Why was this introduced? How was this introduced? What is this thing called Bun that is recently introduced? Is it a competitor to Node.js? And how is it different from Node.js? Second thing we will learn is HTTP, stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and is used in a bunch of places, not Node.js centric, but a very popular protocol for frontends to talk to backends. If you're ever doing backend, or you're a backend developer, then this is where you're spending most of your time. You're mostly building HTTP servers. That is the second thing we're going to understand today. More specifically, if you look at the syllabus, we have done this, and this, and this is what we will try to cover. We will see how far we go, but I think this is all fairly simple, so should be able to cover all of this today. Cool. Feel free to take a screenshot for reference. I'm going to proceed to the next slide. Node.js and its runtime. Okay. Sorry, I skipped this a little bit quickly. So if someone wants to take a screenshot, you have 5 seconds. Great. Node.js and its runtime. Let's discuss 4 high-level jargon thingies and like interview questions, separation amongst these 4 terms. ECMAScript, JavaScript, Node.js, and Bun. They are all separate things, like significantly different. The difference between ECMAScript and JavaScript, and even JavaScript and Node.js, is this as big as the difference between C++ and Java, or Java and JavaScript. So generally good to know what is the difference between all 4 of these technologies. Number 1, ECMAScript. ECMAScript is a scripting language specification on which JavaScript is based. What does that mean? It means that ECMAScript is the specification. You can actually go to this website. Feel free to look at it, the link in the slides. This website is a specification. What is a specification, Harkirat? It is a documentation slash a website that clearly says कि भैया this is what JavaScript should look like. JavaScript should have a numbers, objects. There should be a number constructor. There should be expressions, statements, things like these. There should be a date class. There are a bunch of smart people who write this specification. They are sort of the owners, you can say, of the JavaScript standard. Now, this is significantly different from JavaScript. These guys have just written a doc. They have said, whoever wants to write a JavaScript compiler, please make sure you support all of these things, because whoever will be writing JavaScript code will be able to like write whatever numbers, strings, integers, things like these. So whoever is writing a compiler for JavaScript, please follow all of these. This also keeps getting updated. Every year they will add some new things here. For example, promises were introduced much later. And every new year, you will see some extra things that these smart people add that every JavaScript compiler should support. What is a JavaScript compiler now? Also, Kirat, you said JavaScript is not a compiled language. It is a interpreted language. Yes, you can say JavaScript engine. Something is converting your JavaScript code into zeros and ones. What is that thing? That's what we'll discuss in the next slide. What is JavaScript? What was ECMAScript? ECMAScript is a scripting language specification standardized by the ECMA International in this thing, forget, don't worry. It serves as the guidelines or rules for the scripting language's design. It is a bunch of guidelines and docs. Okay, whoever wants to write a compiler for JavaScript, make sure you're following these, like these, supporting these variables, integers, numbers, strings, things like these. ECMAScript has various versions. You might have heard of, ES5, ES6, ES 2017. And what does this mean? This is the latest specification. You might have also heard of Internet Explorer only supports ES5. No one has updated its code since then. And that is true. Okay? Browsers keep getting outdated, especially like Internet Explorer. No one's writing its code today. So it supported an old version of ECMAScript. It still supports that. If you try to, for example, write a promise. I'm just giving an example here. This might not be 100% true, but let's say you write a promise and promises were introduced here and Internet Explorer only supports this, then Internet Explorer will not be able to understand your JavaScript code. So whoever is writing these compilers needs to make sure they are keeping themselves up to date with the ECMAScript standard. JavaScript implementation. This is the JavaScript implementation. People who actually write the compilers. JavaScript is a scripting language that conforms to this specification. It is most widely used. It is the most widely known and used implementation of ECMAScript. Beyond ECMAScript, JavaScript includes additional features that are not part of the ECMAScript specification, like the DOM, which is crucial for web development, but isn't necessarily defined by ECMAScript. This part is important. We discussed this a little bit yesterday. I told you, okay, by set timeout, fs.read file, ignore fs.read file, but set timeout. Where was this present? This was present in web APIs. And what did I tell you? Okay, this isn't really part of JavaScript. JavaScript doesn't say there should be a set timeout function or a fs.read file function. JavaScript simply says where, const, let function, things like these. But since it is a very common use case in a browser for you to have a timeout, the browsers introduced this on top of the ECMAScript, which is why it is said like it is called a web API. It is something extra that did not already exist in this specification, because people know that JavaScript, if you're in the browser, you will need set timeout. If you're in the backend, you will have to read a file. So these are extra things that are not necessarily defined in ECMAScript, but Node.js provides you this, and JavaScript provides you, or JavaScript in the browser provides you this. Okay. We're still at JavaScript. Let's talk about a few common compilers. This thing I was saying, anyone can write a compiler. And there is no single compiler for JavaScript. Multiple people have created their own. The two most popular ones are, the most popular one is V8, which is used inside Chromium or Google Chrome, basically. Google Chrome can run JavaScript. The founders of Google Chrome, which basically means the Chrome team at Google, wrote this compiler in-house, which is called V8. There is some part of it, I think, is open source, not completely, which you can look at here. It's written in C, and it takes the JavaScript code, converts it into zeros and ones. That is the goal of this project. And similarly, Firefox created their own. A bunch of browsers have created their own engines. There is no single standard, this is the right one, even though V8 is the most popular engine that is used. whoever is writing the code for this or this needs to make sure that whenever the ECMAScript standard is updating, they are updating their C code here, they're updating their, Rust code here, because this one is written primarily in Rust from what I know. So anytime a new standard is introduced every year, they have to make changes to this code base and introduce those constructs. This is a compiler. This is not written in JavaScript. This is what compiles JavaScript code into zeros and ones. I will repeat this because this is sort of important. And let's see if I can share my iPad. Seems like we're out of luck today. Oh, there we go. All right. ECMAScript. Bunch of smart people did not part. Some people here like work at Google. Some of the smart people who sort of write the compiler at Google and whatever Firefox, SpiderMonkey, and this is called V8. Some of the people in this team are sort of part of the ECMAScript standard. They decide how JavaScript should grow. But once they put out a doc, okay, bhaiya, this is the updated 2023 JavaScript standard. These guys write code in C. These guys can write code in Rust to create a compiler where anyone like me can come write some JavaScript code, and the engine will convert it into zeros and ones, and vice versa. Not vice versa. Like engine will convert it to 0 to 1s. Every browser, not every browser, like a lot of browsers just use V8. But initially there were wars. So Chrome introduced V8, so they introduced SpiderMonkey, the Netscape had their own. But eventually today you can clearly see the browser wars have been won by Chrome. So V8 is the common engine today. Even Node.js uses V8 only. We will discuss that in the next slide. So what is the V8 engine, specifically the one that Google uses? V8 is an open source JavaScript engine developed by the Chromium project for Google Chrome and Chromium web browser. There are sort of two versions of Google Chrome. One is open source, one isn't. Both of them use the V8 engine, which it seems like is completely open source. It is written in C++ and is responsible for compiling JavaScript code into native machine code before executing it, which generally improves performance. Cool. Lot of jargon. Let's move on to the next slide. What is Node.js? Here comes something very important, very novel, something new that came into the world and sort of changed how backend development is done. Okay, some smart people realized so JavaScript was meant for the browser. It was a language that was meant to be done inside the browser. Never was it meant to run, in your terminal, in your computer, on a data center. It was कि भैया, there is this thing called the browser, and anytime someone wants to create a website, they will write code in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This language's primarily goal was that when you start Google Chrome is when JavaScript will start to execute. No one ran this on their machine for like backend application, which Java is sort of a good language for, or Golang is a good language for. No one used JavaScript for this. But in somewhere, I think 2012 or 2013, could be wrong on the date, some smart people realized that bhai, the engine is written, the language is written, you can convert JavaScript code into zeros and ones. Why not take this V8 engine, pull it out, add some extra functionality on top of V8, like read file, create HTTP servers, things like these, a bunch of common use cases that Java provides you, and make JavaScript a backend language. This is when Node.js came into the picture, and they said, there are a lot of great JavaScript developers out there. Already very difficult to learn a new language. These people know JavaScript. These people need to learn JavaScript. Whoever wants to create a website needs to learn JavaScript. So if some people already know this, why do they have to learn two different stacks? Let's bring JavaScript outside the browser. Let's take this V8 compiler, pull it out, so that anyone can write JavaScript code and convert it into zeros and ones. And also add some extra functions on top, which most backend applications need. For example, reading from a file. And that became the Node.js framework. Was very new back in the day. People weren't sure, okay, why would you want to use JavaScript for the backend, because it isn't very performant. But it ended up sort of doing really well because JavaScript is easy to understand also. And JavaScript, if you already know it once, it's easy to hire engineers who can write the same stack on the front end and the back end. Okay? Some smart people took out the V8 engine, added some backend things on top to create a new runtime. Very important thing. What is Node.js? Is it a language? No. Is it a framework? No. It is a runtime. Harkiyat, what does runtime mean? It means something that can run JavaScript, something that can compile JavaScript and also provides you a bunch of extra things. Very important sort of interview question. Is Node.js a language? No. JavaScript is a language. Node.js is a runtime to compete with backend languages like Java. Not really compete, but I just put it there. JavaScript was never meant to be run on the backend. Eventually became a very popular framework and is the popular choice of runtime on the backend today. Pretty popular. I'm not saying the first one, but pretty popular today. Okay? Now this is Node. What is this new thing called Bun that is introduced in the last 1 year? Is it the same thing? Is it different? What is it? It is a competitor. It is clearly whatever Node.js does, we will do better. We know Node.js took the V8 engine, added some fluff on top that lets people write JavaScript in the backend. We will do the same thing, but better. What language is Node.js written in? I think it is in C++, C or C++. What language is Bun written in? It is written in this language called Zig. And that is a very fast language that traders use, is becoming the popular language for, low latency systems today. Bun is written in that language and it has sort of outperformed Node.js on a bunch of metrics. For example, if you create a simple for loop in Node.js versus like if you run a simple for loop in Node.js versus in Bun, this will be significantly faster, and a bunch of other like use cases where Bun is 100 times faster. So what is Bun? Other than the fact that JavaScript is single threaded. So it is single threaded in both of them. It's not like Bun made it multi threaded. Node.js is generally slow. Some smart people said we want to rewrite the JavaScript runtime for the backend, and they introduced Bun. It is significantly faster. It is written in Zig, which is another language. Cool. The code base of Bun can be found here. Do I ever have to read this code base or the Node.js code base, which you can also find on GitHub? No, not for the longest time. Unless you want to become a core contributor, sure you can. Totally out of scope for this code for us to go into these code bases. Cool. These are the high level things. Let's quickly recap. ECMAScript, a standard, basically a bunch of docs that state whoever wants to create a JavaScript engine, this is how you create it. JavaScript, the browser JavaScript runtime, the V8 engine, the JavaScript compiler that runs inside your browser. Node.js pulls out V8 from here, created a backend runtime. Anyone can now compile Node.js code on the backend, not just in the browser. Bun, Node.js is bad, Node.js is slow, Node.js is archaic. Developers here are very lazy. We will come and create a competitor, and so they did. Cool. We will be focusing on Node.js, not on Bun. That will be our primary runtime for the backend, but it is very easy to switch between the two. Bun is very new, still catching up, still sort of in alpha, but there is a very high probability eventually people from Node.js move to Bun. They're making it highly backward compatible, which means any Node.js library that's out there, they're trying to support in Bun as well. So there's a high probability eventually you compile your code in Bun and not in Node.js. The code will still look the same. Specifically, how do you write backend applications using JavaScript is what we will learn today. Cool. Good pause here. High level, we have learned just these 4 things. Now we are going to get into Node.js. And what are these backend applications I'm talking about? What are these applications that you can create outside the browser, Harkirat? Number 1, CLIs. What does that stand for, Harkirat? CLI stands for command line interface. I hope a few of you have seen this thing called the terminal, the flashy thing that people use as hackers. We are going to release a video on this tomorrow, by the way. What is bash and how do you use these commands? But as you can see, I can run some commands here that hackers do. If you're a complete beginner, people run some commands here and something happens. If you want to create a command like this, that is called a command line interface. That is one thing that Node.js lets you do. As you can see, this is not running in my browser. This is running inside my terminal. So this is a backend application. That is the first thing that it lets you create. You can sort of create a video player on it. This is not completely true. You can get very close, but you will use some C++ if you do this. You can create games in Node.js. All 3 are like, these are fancy use cases. What is the main use case of Node.js? where you will be working on it. If you're, working in in a company or generally on your own projects, it is to create an HTTP server. 95% of the time, this is what you're using Node.js for. You're writing some other logic as well, but at a high level, your end goal is okay, you need to create an HTTP server. For this, we'll have to break down what is HTTP, what is a server. So let's do that next. What exactly is an HTTP server? Here you said Node.js was introduced as a backend. Node.js can do a bunch of things. What is the most popular use case that Node.js gives you in the backend is creating an HTTP server. What is an HTTP server? Now, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Do you have to worry about this? Never in your life, unless you're giving a computer networks examination. Never have to worry about its full form. But if you notice, it says protocol here. What is protocol? Protocol in the real world is ke bhaiya, whenever we meet each other, we shake hands. That is sort of a protocol. Both the parties know that one party is going to extend their hand, other party is supposed to shake their hand, right? This is sort of a protocol. Okay, whenever people meet, they know they're supposed to talk to each other. Another common thing is okay, your phones run a protocol. Whenever I click, like dial a number and click on the call button, the call goes out somewhere. The other side receives a ring. There is a standard protocol. Okay, this thing happens when Harkirat clicks on this thing. There are some radio waves that go out, reach the other side. And the other side is supposed to bring up a screen that someone can click the green button on. High level, that's a protocol. So is HTTP, a protocol that is defined for machines to communicate. What happens when I call? Phones communicate. How do they communicate? Via speech. I talk, the other person comprehends, they respond, I comprehend. Then I cut the call. Machines also can talk to each other. That is actually what the internet is. It is just a bunch of machines talking to each other. If you are right now receiving audio and video from me, it is just my machine sending my audio and video to one server of Zoom, and then Zoom sending that video to you. So what is happening? Our machines are communicating. What protocols are our machines using right now, Harkirat? They are using the WebRTC protocol, which is a protocol used for video communication. Are we discussing that today, Harkirat? No. We are discussing the HTTP protocol. So what is the HTTP protocol, Harkirat? Specifically for websites, it is the most common way for your website's front end to talk to its backend. Wow, Harkirat. From one jarring this thing concept to two more jarring concepts, front ends and backends. What is a front end? What is a backend? And what do you mean when you say this is the protocol that is being used for them to communicate? Who is communicating here? My phone with my girlfriend. Who is communicating here? It is front end and back end. What are front ends and back ends? First, let's understand what are front ends, what are back ends. You might have definitely heard of front end developer, 30 LPA offer 0, 65 LPA to 30 LPA front end developer job, and back end developer. So you high level understand that there is a job role front end, there is a job role back end. What do those job roles entail? In a front end job role, you create just the front ends. In the back end job role, you write code just for backends. And in a full stack job role, you do both of them. Question is, what are these? Let's look at it from an example. Let's go to chat.openai.com on my machine. I went here. I see a bunch of text here, input box button. If you've gone through the HTML, CSS, JavaScript class, you can create all of this on your machine as well. You understand how to write HTML, CSS code that renders a website like this. I see this website. This is what is called the front end. What else is a front end? The ChatGPT mobile app is also a front end. A native application I might have for ChatGPT is also a front end. All these are technically called either clients or front ends. Akirat, if this is a front end, what is a back end? Great question. When I type a message here, what is 2 plus? How am I doing in this class? And I press enter. Where do you think this response is coming from? Is it something running on my machine? Or is it something coming from someplace else? You might have heard of OpenAPI has a closed source model, which means they will never reveal how they reached from here to here. This machine learning model will never run on my browser. If it ran on my browser, then I have OpenAI's code and I'm, very rich because I can use it. They would never allow that. For that reason, the conversion from here to here actually happens on an OpenAI server. That is what is called the backend, a place where some proprietary code runs. For example, in Paytm, my balance is your balance is. If I say send, that send of 100 rupees first goes to a backend server and then, gets debited from my account, gets credited into your account. The place where all of this code is running is the backend. That is what Node.js lets you write. And what lets you write the front end code, Harkirat? It is either HTML, CSS, or JavaScript or React. For writing front end code, for writing a website like this, you would use HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or React. For writing front end code in the mobile, you would use whatever Flutter, React Native, Java. For writing backend code, you would use something like Java. You can use something like there are a bunch of languages like Rust, Golang, all of these. High level, what do we have to understand? Okay, there are always two things that are important when it comes to a website. If you go to any website, google.com, the thing that you see here is called the front end. The place where a request goes. What is a request? We will see. But when I click on the search button, a place where the request goes and some response comes back and renders search results. This place, a very big data center by Google, usually in the US, not even in India, is called the backend server. This is the front end. And what did I say? What does HTTP let you do? It lets these communicate with each other. So Harkirat, you are saying when I click on the search button here, or when I go to the ChatGPT website and click on enter, the protocol that lets this front end communicate to the backend and get back a response, the protocol that is used there is the HTTP protocol. Yes. And 90% of the interactions, maybe 95%, if you go to Facebook, if you go to LinkedIn, if you go to Instagram, everyone is using HTTP. There are other protocols that let front ends and backends communicate. 90 to 95% of the time, it is going to be HTTP. Sometimes there are some other protocols like WebSocket, if you've heard of it, or other fancy protocols that you use. 95% of the time, HTTP. What are we writing today? What is the goal for today? Write an HTTP server in Node.js. Harkirat, when we write it, will we deploy it here in the US? We can. We won't. We will just run it on our machine, but we can. Once you write the Node.js code for today, you can actually run it in a data center like this. Your code will run here on this machine. How will I communicate with it, Harkirat? We will see by the end of the class. Cool. Good checkpoint. Understood HTTP. The biggest use case of Node.js that you will use. Node.js, not JavaScript. JavaScript is used for frontend. Node.js is used for backend. What use cases does it have? All of these. Which are we focused on? This. What is this? Thing that lets frontends and backends communicate. This is at a high level what it looks like. If I am here in India, I go to openai.com, click on search. There are a bunch of wires, right? I have this router that I got installed, which goes to a wire to the top of my building, which goes to another wire in center of Delhi, so on and so forth, keeps on traveling. There's like a bunch of wires that telecom companies buy. There's literally wires from here to here under the sea, very big mote wires. And when I click on send, a request actually goes through these wires here. Some computation happens on the machine learning model on the OpenAI servers, and then some response comes back. It is similar to me calling someone here at OpenAI and saying, hey, bro, what is the response of how is my class going? And that person being like, okay, wait, let me ask the machine learning model. Asks the model, gets the response, and then responds. It is very similar to that. Only it happens, textually and without the interaction of humans. It happens via code. Some code that follows the HTTP protocol. What is an HTTP server? Okay. This is the HTTP protocol that lets you do this. What is an HTTP server? The thing that is running here, the thing that exposes the machine learning model to the world. Kirat, you said exposes the machine learning model. Does that mean that I can just, read the code? No. When I say exposes, I mean that it accepts a single string from the end user. It checks, is this Harkirat? It checks, do they have ChatGPT +4? After these checks, is when it sends your input to these heavy machine learning machines and responds back. So the HTTP server is supposed to do 10 different things. One of them, those things is authentication. Even though it is exposed on the internet, it will do authentication. Make sure you have GPT-4 access and only then let you hit the model. What is an HTTP server? Some code that follows the HTTP protocol. We are going to write that code today in Node.js, but you can write that code in Java as well and create an HTTP server and is able to communicate with the clients all around the world, which includes browsers, mobile apps. Harkirat, so you're saying I can write some code today and someone else in Rajasthan can hit my HTTP server? Not exactly. If you run it on your local machine, someone in Rajasthan will not be able to hit it. You need something called public IPs to be able to do that. But you can at least locally try. You can ask your friend who's on the same Wi-Fi to hit your website or hit your backend, and they will be able to. You have not yet deployed it, on the internet where you have a public IP, which is why you won't be able to, at least today, do what you might be thinking of doing. I will create a website and deploy it on the internet. Might not be able to do that today. Think of it being similar to the call app on your phone, which lets you communicate with your friends. Okay. Next slide. HTTP protocol, lot of text. Let's just go through it quickly and start to understand it more practically. In the end, it is the client throwing some information at a server doing something with that information, server responding back with the final result. Have we seen this before until now? What did I say a function was? In JavaScript, what is a function? Something that takes an input, does a bunch of things with it, and returns an output. What is an HTTP server? Something that takes an input from someone on the internet. How is class going? Does some computation, which is this section, responds back with the response. Class is doing great. Okay. You can actually think of them as very similar. Only functions exist locally on your machine, and it is something you call here. These are sometimes also referred to as remote procedure calls, which means you're calling a function. Think of HTTP as you're calling a function, but on someone else's machine. Someone else's more heavy machine, someone else's more, machine that has a machine learning model or some other thing that you don't have locally, but you want to access. That is at a high level what a HTTP server is. Think of them as functions where arguments are something the client sends, which is what I sent when I go to Google search or when I go to ChatGPT. Rather than calling a function by its name, the client uses a URL. We will see this very soon. Don't worry about it. Rather than the function body, the server does something with the request, runs a machine learning model. Rather than the function returning a value, server responds back some data, sends that data over the wire to you back in India. Cool. Let's get into the technicalities of it. It's not easy building something like this, allowing people to communicate. If I tell you, explain me how communication happens when I call someone, it will be hard. There is a protocol underneath, and there are 10 different things you need to know to be able to write HTTP servers. So let's understand that. Okay, what are these things you need to know when you're sending a request? What are the things you need to know when you're receiving a request? Or what are the things that the server needs to know when it is responding back? Similar to how, if you're calling a function, you need to know these are arguments. This is function body. There is a return value. This is how you call the function, whatever, hello world, and then bracket open, bracket close, and send the arguments here. Just how you need to know this. You need to know 10 different things to be able to say, I can build an HTTP server, or I can send a request to an HTTP server. So let's start with the first thing. What are the things that the client needs to worry about? Before that, let's take a quick pause. How is everyone doing? Is the chat okay? Let me open chat. I won't be able to answer questions here, but it is still laggy. Okay. All right. Slow. Yeah. Okay. Let's pick up the pace a little bit then. If you're writing an HTTP server, these are the things you need to know of. Number one, the protocol that you are exposing. Sorry, when the client is sending a request, my bad, not when you're creating a server. Forget creating a server. Assume ChatGPT has a good server out there. How will you send it a request? You need to know what protocol they are exposed on. Harkirat, you said HTTP is the protocol. Yes. But there is another sort of protocol called HTTPS, which the S stands for secure, which is a more secure way to send a request. So you need to know, are you sending an HTTP request? or are you sending an HTTPS request? What side is this? This is the client side, the side that is sending the request, the browser. You need to know the address or the URL of the backend server. Ankit, what is the URL of the backend server? When I go to google.com, this is the URL of the backend server. Kirat, this is front end. Yes, but this response of the front end still comes from a backend server. And any future request that you send as well, you need to know a URL which maps to the backend server, how we will see very soon. But you need to know this URL. A bunch of other small things like the IP and the port, something we'll discuss very soon. You need to know the route. What is the route, Harkirat? Something we'll see very soon. You need to, when you're sending, send something called the headers, the body, and the query parameters. And lastly, you need to send something called the method. Whenever you're sending the request, you need to specify these things. Just like whenever you were calling a function, you had to send in some arguments. We will dive more deeper into what each one of these are very soon. Things that the server needs to worry about. Whenever the server receives a request, it does some maths, some machine learning model that runs for Google. It checks the top 10 results, gets them for you. Once it has those, when it is responding, it has to respond with some response headers, some response body, and something called status codes. Whenever we will write our HTTP server today, we will understand these three things and we will see how our backend server can actually send a status code, send somebody. Cool. This body is where, the response of your Google results comes back. Let's understand the client side in a little more detail. What did I say? Protocol. Basically, they have to specify a URL. Now, the URL has a few parts. This is the protocol of the URL. This is the actual domain name of the URL. This is the route. Route basically means whatever you see after the website is written, which in this case can be, backend dash API slash conversation. This is actually the route for ChatGPT. Harkirat, why do you need to specify a route? The ChatGPT server can do 10 different things. It can return you your existing conversations. It can let you create a new conversation. So the route specifies what exactly are you trying to do. In my case, I am sending a request to get back a response, bro, creating a conversation, which is why, as you can see, the route here is backend dash API slash conversation. Headers, may you send a few things. The most important thing you send is your some authentication information. Okay, you are logged in. If I go to our website here, this one, I am sending some requests to the backend. Now I'm going to do a few things. Don't worry about them. Let's leave this. But when I'm here, can you see there's a logout button? My backend somehow knows that this person is logged in. How does it know that? It knows that through my cookie, which is one of many headers that you can send. We will see this more very soon. Don't worry if you don't worry, understand it just yet. Body. This is the most important bit. Whenever you're sending a request to the backend, you are asking it to do something, right? Just like when you call a function, you ask it to do something. You send some arguments. This is the main sort of arguments that you send. If I'm asking the ChatGPT server, what is 2 plus 2? This is what I will send in the body. If I go to chatgpt.openai.com and ask it, what is 2 plus 2? The request that goes out will have some body. The body will have this text in there. Lastly, something called the method. This basically specifies what kind of requests you're sending. Do you want to put some data on the server, which usually post means you're trying to post some data? Do you want to get some data? That is another popular method. What would be a get request, Harkirat? ChatGPT earlier used to have a sidebar here that would show my history. That is a get request. Okay, you are trying to get all your information. And there are a bunch of other methods we'll discuss later on. But at a high level, when you're sending, you are sending all of these things. Harkirat, can you show me? Sure. If you actually want to see a request going out from your browser to your backend, you can go to chat.openai.com here. As long as you are inside Chrome, right click and click on inspect and you will see a network tab. This network tab shows you all your network requests. And if I ask, what is 2 plus 2? Ignore all the requests that came right now. In fact, feel free to reject them. As soon as I click enter, you see a request goes out, gives me back a status code, so I'll ignore that. But the request that went out, where did it go? This was the URL where it went, chat.openai.com/backend API/conversation. This was the method, post request. These were response headers, ignore those. These were the request headers. And as you can see, here it says authorization. This is my cookie. If I send you this, you can actually log in as my OpenAI account and use my GPT-4, for example. So never share this with anyone. That is why I'm sort of hiding this a little bit. I'm sending a bunch of headers. Authorization is one of them. I said cookie authorization. Feel free to use them interchangeably. This header is where I send ke I am Harkirat and the server knows kaisa this is Harkirat. They somehow decode this, very long hash that we have to verify that this is Harkirat. Request headers are done. URL is done. Protocol is done. Route is done. What is left? The body. For that, go to payload. And here, as you can see, I send a bunch of things. It's actually a very big object, but somewhere there you will see what is 2 plus 2 is something that I sent to the backend server, which means this much is what the ChatGPT server expects. Now I can send this request from here. I can actually send this request from my browser as well. I can send this request from my mobile app as well. But everywhere, request will be going out to this server only. Request will be carrying an authorization header. Request will be carrying some message body. Harkirat, where did the header come from? This header right here. You never put it anywhere. Whenever you log in, this header gets stored somewhere in your browser, and every subsequent request, it goes out. That is how you create sort of sticky sessions inside a website. You don't always log in every 1 second, right? On every request. You log in once, you get back some token, and then with every future request, you send that token. That is exactly what I'm doing here, along with the other things I need to send. Cool. Feel free to inspect this on your site. But high level, protocol, URL, route, header, body, method. Method here was post, but you will see a bunch of other requests that are going out where the method can be, let's see if there is any get, not here, but if I refresh, let's see if there are any get requests. There you go. There is a get request also. Went to someone else. What is this? Here, where did it go? Like companies use a bunch of external libraries. This is one of those. But conversation limit. chat.openai.com/public API/conversation limit. A request went out there and some inputs it went with, and it was a get request. Why was it a get request? But it is because it is sort of trying to get some data from the backend. Specifically, it's trying to get the conversation limit. Cool. That's what methods are. We will understand this slightly better as time goes by. We will actually discuss this very soon. But let's first understand the other side. Okay, browser, to we understand. Okay, browser needs to send all of these when it wants to request something from the backend. This is similar to what do I have to do when I have to call someone? I have to put their number, click on call, khatam. Much easier. Here, this part is sort of similar to calling them their phone number, but there are a bunch of other things because you have to specify. Okay, bhai, this is what I want to ask. Please give me the answer. Versus when you're calling someone, you call them, they pick up, and then you say, okay, I want this thing. That's the body. And header information, just think of them just authentication. We will see it later on in more depth. If you don't understand headers yet, don't worry about it. So this is the client and this is the server. This is how I send the request, which is the thing that we discussed in the last slide. This is what the server responds with. It sends you a response header. Don't worry too much about this. This is used 99% of the time only when you're signing in. When you sign in is when you get back the cookie from the server here, and then you can sort of store it. But other than that, not really used very often. Response body. This is important. This is where you get back the response from them. Haan bhaiya, this is your answer to your question. 2 plus 2 equal to 4. What was the question I asked? What is 2 plus 2? This is the response. And last thing, something called the status code, which is basically a way to signal कि हाँ, ignore the body. This is the status code of the request, which could be 200, could be 500. You might have heard of 404 error not found. These are all status code that the server responds with. But at a high level, you might have a question that I had initially. Why do you need a status code? And even why do you need a method? These are two things that question that people should ask. Okay, if you have a body, can't you just be like body mein ye lo, status code is this? And if you have a body here, why do you have headers separately? Why do you have methods separately? Can't these all be together? Can't I just send a request here with the body which has everything? Good question. You can. Um, but this is what's called the sort of specification. This is how whoever defined the protocol said, okay, let's keep some separation of concern. Let's keep all the authentication information here. Let's keep what you want to actually ask here. Let's keep what kind of request you're sending here. But can you always just send post requests? Yes, your server can still handle them. But it is good convention to follow. If you're trying to put some data on the server, then send a post request. Get some data, send a get request. But what these are, we will discuss very soon. Okay? Let me do a poll here. Do we understand this much? Cool. Great. Alrighty. So 92% basically understand, which is a good signal for me to proceed. 8%. Whoever is still confused a little bit, just worry about the code. If you, these things no one really cares about for the longest time. The code, if you understand how you create an HTTP server, if you understand how do you talk to them, if you understand, you're good. All right. Let's proceed. Some more jargon. We're getting into the coding bit very soon. HTTP protocol. So now a very popular interview question is, what happens when I go to google.com and press enter? What are the sequence of events that happen in your browser? Things that happen in your browser after you fire the request. We will get to how to fire the request later on. Like, for example, if you go here, until now, we've written some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We can actually create an input box, create a button. When I type something and press enter, how we send this request is something we will see later on. But assuming this request is going out, what exactly is happening in your browser when you give it a URL, a body, a header, and the method? Browser will parse the URL. Who has written all of this code? The Chrome developers have written this. Bhai, whenever someone sends a request, be it either from here, this is also this is the same as the request that goes out when I click here on a button. You can actually see it. If I go here, click on enter, you will see at the very top there is a request that's going out. It is a get request. Where is it going out to? Chat.openai.com. What is the route? It is slash. What is the data? There is no data. What is it responding back with? This is a new thing I hadn't introduced yet. It is responding back with HTML. So even when you go to google.com, there is an HTTP request only going out. Only it is responding back with some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is why, you see something rendered here versus, it responding back with some data. For example, if I type something here and click on submit, this request responds back with uh, some, JSON data, sort of a JavaScript object. We've done JSON in an offline class. So it responds back with the JSON data. But if I go here, it responds back with an HTML data. Either way, if you're sending a request, what exactly is happening in your browser? Number one, browser is parsing the URL. The first thing it is doing is getting out, okay, bhaiya, where are you sending the request? Is it google.com? Is it chat.openai.com? Finding that out. Does a DNS lookup. Some of you might know this, some of you might not know this. DNS lookup basically is, okay, bhaiya, we go to google.com, but under the hood, what actually where the request goes out is an IP. Some of you might have heard of this thing called an IP or IP address. Basically, just like we have phone numbers, we have something called IP addresses. The way to find your friend, call them, is to put their phone number, click on call. Similarly, the way to find a server on the internet is to actually specify an IP. What is an IP? Think of it as exactly as a phone number. It looks something like this: 237.1.22.55. Something like this. It will look like. If you are in, this is your browser, and this is the world, a bunch of routers, the internet, and this is a ChatGPT server. This server will have an IP similar to how I have a phone number. How they get an IP assigned is a different question, but they have an IP. Let's say it's 1.2.3.4. When I go to ChatGPT domain.com, the first thing that happens is DNS resolution. What does it stand for? Domain name service resolution. Domain name service, DNS. What is it? People realized कि भैया it's very hard to, even though IPs are how you find machines, if you want to find one machine on the internet, you have to specify its IP. But it's very hard for people to remember IPs. It will be very hard if you have to, whenever you want to go to Google, you have to go to 23.1.5.7. So this system was created कि भैया people will come, buy domain names, and they can map their domain names to an IP. The first thing that your browser does is gets the phone number or what gets the IP from this URL. How it gets it is a whole different question. Don't worry about it. But it is similar to if I call, my contact here, Raman, under the hood, the phone realizes that this is actually 8121314151 and makes the call there. That is the one important thing that happens. After that, it's establishes a connection, does something called a handshake, computer network stuff. If you've done computer networks in college, there is this thing called the OSI model, and then there are like 7 layers: transport layer, network layer, and this is the high level layer, this is the low level layer, and then you send out the request, and on the other side also there are 7 layers. Very complicated computer network theoretical stuff. Under the hood, all that theoretical stuff does happen. One very common thing that happens is something called the handshake, where both the sides send each other sins and acts. This is very, don't even worry about it. This is just theoretical computer networks. Under the hood, a bunch of things are happening. You don't have to worry about that. But that is one thing that happens when the browser is able to resolve the IP, sends a request to there, and then the standard things happen. Okay, the server does something with it and responds back to it. When you're writing backend code or frontend code, you don't worry about any of this. Cool. Establishes a connection. What is DNS resolution? URLs are just like contacts in your phone. In the end, they map to an IP. If you ever want to buy a URL of your own, you will need to point it to an IP. For example, you all go to app.100xdevs.com, but under the hood, this actually points to an IP. Now I'm going to run a command. You don't have to worry about it. But if I run ping app.100xdevs.com, what does it say? This points to 76.76.21.61. Whose IP is this? This is Vercel's IP. Vercel is another cloud provider who has hosted my code. This maps to this. I can also do ping google.com. And it gives me back 142.250.194.78. This is the IP of a Google server, similar to a phone number of my friend that I might look up in my phone number. Cool. In my directory in my phone. Cool. How do you create this? So I went to whatever domains.googles.com and bought 100xdevs.com for some money, whatever, let's say 700 rupees or something, I think. Then I go here to this DNS section on this website. And as you can see, I have a bunch of these mappings. I say week 12-react.100xdevs.com points to this IP. And where you guys see the code base, app.100xdevs.com points to this DNS, which under the hood points to an IP. Don't even worry about it. But at a high level, whenever you buy a domain name, you can actually point subdomains to various IPs. You have to do that to expose or give to your friend कि भैया access my code here. It is actually running on this machine, but you can access it here. You don't have to go here because this is very ugly to write in the browser. This is very neat to write in the browser. Cool. All right. Let's go back here. DNS resolution, we understand a little bit. Things that happen on your server after the request is received. What was this? This was what is happening in your browser. What happens in your server? You get the inputs somehow at a high level, especially if you're using Node.js and the Express library. Very simple, you get the inputs. You do some computation on it. You return the output. This is very simple stuff. If you want to go into the depths of it, there is something called a port on your machine where the request actually comes. You are actually listening on that port where you decode the request and deserialize the request and 100 things. But if you use Express, you get input, you do some math, you return the output. Very simple stuff. If you're using a library like Spring Boot in Java or Express in JavaScript, they hide a lot of this complexity of creating an HTTP server, which is why you as the application developer do very simple things. Okay. Let's see this in action. I already showed you. Yeah, this is the first section where you see all of this. Preview section, response section where you can see the response. Feel free to explore it after the class. One common question, as I said, okay, what are the common methods here when you're sending a request to the backend server? Post, I told you, there's also get, put, and delete. What are good use cases of this? Whenever you're sending a request to get back, let's say your chat GPT conversations, which was a feature that they don't anymore, but you could see your conversations here on the left. Then you would send a get request. Whenever you're sending, I'm updating my name, let's say in OpenAI settings, I am posting something there. More specifically, in that case, I'm actually putting something there. When you update something, it's usually considered as a put. When you're adding something, for example, I am adding a conversation, is when it is considered as a post. So in that case, you send a post request. And also in your backend, you have a post handler. You are the chat. It depends on the chat GPT's developer. It's not necessary that if he is handling the request to handle a conversation, what is 2 plus 2? It's not necessary that this has to be a post handler. It can be a get handler. It depends on whoever is written this code. Whoever is writing the backend code of OpenAI is the person who decides. Now, good practice is if someone is putting something there or posting something there, it is a post request. It should be a post request. So the handler should be post, and whoever is sending the request should also send a post request. Similarly, if the request is bhai, get my conversations, then it should be a get request, and whoever is responding also responds back with whoever is the backend code developer writes a get handler here. We will see how you write them, but at a high level, doesn't have to follow this convention. If you're deleting some data, for example, if I'm deleting a conversation, doesn't have to be a delete request, but good practice, whoever is writing the code should write it in a way where they are following these practices. And this is true for status codes as well. Whenever the server is responding back with a status code, ideally, if the request was good, it should respond back with 200. If this specific route doesn't exist, only if I go to chat.openai.com/random123 gibberish, then it should ideally respond with 404. If I send it my wrong cookie, if I update my cookie, send some random cookie, it should ideally respond with 403 and say, because this status code stands for authentication issues, you can actually just Google it. Okay, what is 403 status code mean? And it will tell you. Meaning access requested to the resource is forbidden. If I try to access ChatGPT 4 when I haven't bought it yet, it should ideally respond with 403. The application logic, whoever has written on the backend, should respond back with 403. If they're good developers, they will. If they're bad developers, they won't. Lastly, 500 is a status code you get back if there is some bug in your backend. If your backend cannot, if your backend crashes, then you usually respond back with the 500. If there is some error, you're not able to process a request then. All right. This is what is the status code section. This is what is the methods section. And you don't have to follow these conventions, but good to follow these conventions. Lastly, why do we need status codes? This is just the slide that repeats the same thing. You don't need any of this. You can always just respond back with 200. You can always just send a get request and have get handlers on your backend. But good to follow practices. Question at this point: how do I create my own HTTP server, Hakirat? How do I expose it over the internet like chatgpt.com? How can I give it to my friend? Bhaiya, go to my website.com and they can visit my website. Good questions to ask. Let's dive into that next. But let's take a small break. We're already at 8 p.m. here. So any questions related to what we've discussed until now? There is a break until 8:10. So feel free to take a 12-minute break and take a breather. Going to open chat for questions related to any doubts you might have here. Okay. And there are more types of requests. There is a patch request. There are 1,000 different requests. So these are the important ones. HTTPS server, just small variation you have to do whenever you're, deploying your code. Okay, so if you want it to be secure, as you can see, there is a log here. High level, good question. I say, thoda off topic, not really off topic. We will discuss this when we're actually deploying stuff. But high level, whenever you're sending data from here to here, people can actually snipe on that data. This is what a lot of my friends did back in college, because a lot of college ERPs are actually hosted on HTTP and not on HTTPS. And so they would, sniff a lot of these requests. You can actually see the data that's going through, and they would, pull out passwords and people usually repeat their passwords. They were able to get into the Facebooks and whatever Googles of other people because they got their ERP password. And usually the password that people have on a college ERP is the password that people have on Facebook and Google. For this reason, a college ERP or any website should always be hosted on HTTPS. Now, how does HTTPS work under the hood? How do I create an HTTP server is a whole different question. Can you tell use cases where JS outperforms Golang and Java? Eesh. No good use case from the top of my head. The one place where it not really outperforms, but it is loosely typed. So you can write very ugly code here and get by, right? Because it doesn't do compile time checks. Can you please explain in detail about the runtime? So yeah, what is the runtime? Let's just look at the code base. Let's go to Node.js GitHub. What is the runtime, Akirat? This is the runtime. All of this C code that is written, that takes some JavaScript code that you write, converts it into zeros and ones. Using this one specifically uses the V8 engine also. If you search for V8 here, you will see a bunch of references to V8, which is the underlying JavaScript engine. This is the JavaScript Node.js runtime. Here, this bun exactly the same, sort of. Yeah, bun also does a similar thing, and you can like go here and look at the bun code base, which is written in Zig. Here also you will see, how to compile function to zeros and ones, how to compile whatever HTTP to actually bind it to a port, things like these. So the runtime is basically a bunch of Zig code or a bunch of C code that a bunch of smart people have written that converts the JavaScript that you write into, compile zeros and ones. What is this? Let's close this. All right. Increase the font size. You mean the font size of the slides? We're done with slides, but I will try to keep that in mind for everything else. What do you think about Deno runtime? If you did not catch, so the problem is if you're ever creating a new runtime, make sure it's backward compatible, which Bun is doing because no one is going to learn a new syntax. Can we use authorization token to sign as that user? Great question. You want to do it. This is another thing that people did in college. If you ever get access to your friend's laptop for 5 minutes, this is what you can do. Inspect network, send a request, go here, go to headers. Now I'm not going to show it, but go to the request headers and try to find request headers. Trying to show just enough, and but there you go. Try to find this, this thing right here. Basically, copy this whole thing, then learn a little bit about, how to intercept requests. Then, when you're sending out requests, put his authorization cookie there versus yours, and then you're logged in as him. Then you can, see their profile, things like these. One other thing people do, you can basically, sometimes these things are stored somewhere very securely. If you try to do this, the same for Facebook, it'll be very hard because it creates like something called fingerprints. So, every time it checks the request is coming from the same browser. But for some dumb websites, you can totally just, copy the authorization header or the cookie, intercept your request that's going out somehow, or, replace your cookie somehow. And then you're good to go, you're logged in as them without knowing their email and password. If there is a standard called ECMAScript, is there also standard for other code bases like Java or C++? If no, JavaScript has a special, good question. I think it exists for other languages as well. This could be wrong, actually. I could be wrong on this. C++ compilers, let's see. I mean, we can just ChatGPT. There are definitely specs for Python, I think. Python spec. I think this is true generally for every language, but I could totally be wrong. So, I mean, yeah, Google this. I don't have the good answer for this, but good question. Okay, one more minute before we proceed. Can I say HTTP as a communication method? Yes. I will increase the font size from the coming slides. Laggy. Okay. Few people are saying laggy. I don't have a good solution other than, I try to build something on my own, but Zoom is the industry standard. The other thing we can do is we can stream somehow using HLS, but there'll be very high latency there. But if it keeps happening, we'll figure something out. Okay. Cool. A lot of people have a lot of, high level questions, repeat this, repeat that. I think the best way to learn is by actually coding. So let's code a little bit. Let's, increase the speed and write some code, basically write some HTTP servers, and then we will understand status codes, we will understand methods, things like these. Let's wait for 805 to kick in. If HTTP allow communication, then what is an API? Great question. API is never used alone. It is used with the word HTTP. HTTP API basically is this only, what I showed you. Okay, the request that's going out here, this thing. This you can say is a chat GPT backend HTTP API. But APIs mean different things. A lot of times, in one of my classes, I said we are going to learn about JavaScript APIs. So you can also say, new date, get time. You can say get time is an API. It lets you get the time. Specifically, HTTP APIs is basically this thing that we're discussing today. You can create HTTP APIs and expose it to the world. Alrighty. Um, can a server serve many applications? If yes, how it realizes for which application the request is for? Great question. A server can host multiple requests. The port thing that I talked about, which we will discuss very soon. But I showed you this. I said there is something called the port. So if you have multiple backends, you will run them on different ports. And whoever is calling your backend will actually specify a port ke bhaiya, I want to access chat.gpt.com colon 3000 port, colon 3001 port. And that is how you can have multiple processes on the same server. Cool. Let's write some code and then we will get back into it. I said 8 or 10, 8 10, right? My bad. More chat. I'm so sorry. I said 8 10, I think. So I'll wait for 4 more minutes. Okay. Methods people want to know. We will discuss this. Font size I will increase. How will we use authorization to sign in as a user? I think I showed that. What does parsing a URL mean? It basically means, okay, what do I put here? I say https://chat.com slash something slash something slash something slash something. What is the first thing it needs to do? It needs to figure out, okay, bhaiya, what does chat.openai.com map to? What is the IP for chat.openai.com? Parsing it means removing this, and just getting back this. That is what parsing it means. I am on a virtual machine. If we make a server, will I be able to see that on my phone connect on the same Wi-Fi? Yes. If you run a server and another device is on the same, if you're on a virtual machine, I am unsure. You might have to like route requests to the virtual machine from your main machine. But if you're on a normal machine, you run a process, you can find basically the IP of your machine, which I'm not going to, but run this command ifconfig or ipconfig. It'll give you your machine's local IP. Go to your phone on the same Wi-Fi, put the local IP, and then colon the port of your on which you're hosting the request, and then the process, and then you can hit it. You might hit bumps here based on firewalls. If you're in college, it becomes very difficult. But if you're in your home Wi-Fi, you can actually do this fairly easily. Okay, 2 more minutes, and then we will proceed. Status code is the same anytime or any response. Status codes differ based on if there is a crash on the server. If ChatGPT crashes right now, if I send a request, for example, you might have seen, sometimes ChatGPT gives you a red this thing here, wasn't able to generate. You most 99% of the time, the status code it is responding back with is either 400 or 500 because it was not able to get your response. Can I again answer that? Maja nahi aa raha. Quick overview, please. Okay, let's do a quick recap. Let's first do a poll. Someone said maja nahi aa raha. Polls and quizzes. How's the pace? Let's do this one. भाई तुम मजे लेने आए हो यहाँ पढ़ाई करो. All right. Good. Very mostly slow. 21% slow, 72% okay, and then 8% fast. Fast वालों को मैं ये कहूँगा. I would just say focus on the code, understand high level. I think few things like methods, status codes will get more clearer as we write some code. But again, after the class, I will stay here, happy to take any doubts. Let's write some code, guys, and this should be fairly straightforward. We're actually on time today, so we should be able to, wrap it up by 8:40ish, and then doubt session after that. Cool. How many of you already know Express, have used Express? Let's see. Have you already used Express? Yes or no? Beautiful. So 40% yes and 60% no. Great. So we'll go okay, okay. We'll try to go slow. Let's see. Need to wait until 8:10. All right, 8:10. Let's write some HTTP code, like the server of an let's create our own HTTP server. And if we have time, let's try to deploy it on an AWS machine and see if we can all hit it as well. Okay. How do you write an HTTP server, Harkirat? There are many ways. You can write one in C, C++, Spring Boot, Node.js, Java, any language that you want. We are going to write it in Node.js, and we are going to use a library called Express. It is what is called an external library. What does that mean? It has been written by some really smart people, just like FS. FS was the library that we used in the last class to read the contents of a file. What was the goal of this FS library? It was to give me a file, give me the encoding that you want the answer in, and I will eventually call this callback when I am able to read the contents of the file. Similarly, there are many libraries that let you create an HTTP server, so you don't have to create it from scratch. There are many libraries that use HTTP server. The most famous one is Express. This is slowly actually losing its appeal, and Next.js is becoming popular for backend. But Express is the first one to kick things off from. A great exercise to do today, in case you're up for it after the class, is to create an HTTP server from scratch in C or C++. C gives you access to very low level constructs, so you can actually bind it to a port, listen to the data that's coming in the port, parse that data, understand what that data is, figure out the body, try to parse the body. First 100 bytes are going to be header, next 100 bytes are going to be something, so on and so forth. If you want to do this, do this. This was an exercise I was given back in college and I did it. Totally out of scope for this course. But if you're looking for a challenge, try to write a HTTP server from scratch in C or C++. Cool. The library that we're using, Express, let's get a simple HTTP server. At this point, you will realize, okay, is this so easy, Harkirat? Was this so easy? And the answer is yes. This is actually very easy. Let's go to Replit and break it again. There's a good chance we break it, but let's try it out. Let's go to Replit. Let's not do this locally. If this doesn't work, we will do this locally. But let's try to go to Replit. Click on Create REPL on the top left. Click on Node.js here and click on Create REPL. Oh, no, it did work. Interesting. Did it work for you guys is the question. I'm going to wait for 10 seconds while I write some code. And if it does not work for you, it is fine. We can run it locally as well. Are we good to go on Replit? Going to launch. Oh, oopsie daisy. Going to launch a poll here. Shall we proceed? Okay. Does Replit work for you? Yes or no? Few people yes, few people no. So for the people for whom the answer is yes, stay here. For the people for whom the answer is no, go to Visual Studio Code. And if you want to do this, like other people want to do this locally as well, feel free to follow along what I'm doing. Top left, click on File and click on create a new. Nah, there isn't. Okay. Go to your file system. Go to a folder of your choice. And यहाँ पे go to. I'm in this folder. Create an empty folder here for me. Everyone do it. If you want, if you have Node.js locally, do this. Rather than going to Replit, just do this. Create a new folder. Call it HTTP server 1. If you cannot do this, that's fine as well. Go to your file system, create a new folder, open it in VS Code. So file, open, code 2, followed by HTTP server, open, save. I'm going to give you guys 20 more seconds to do this. Just open an empty folder in VS Code. If there are any questions at this point, opening chat. All right. one question not related to a particular session, covering advanced design patterns we might do in an offline class. Why am I not able to see headers in google.com and inspected in network section? You should be able to see, inspect, enter, network, go here, request headers. You should see something like this. All right. Some people are here. That is fine. People that are not here, go to Visual Studio Code, click on terminal, click on new terminal here. And hopefully you see your current folder name here. If you have installed npm or node, then this will run for you. If you have not, it won't, and that is fine. If you have though, run this command npm space init space -y. Alkiyat, what does it do? Don't even worry about it, but just run it for me for 1 second. When you run this command, what was the command? This. You should see a file created here called package.json. Don't worry too much about the file just yet. I will explain what it is eventually. Right next to the file, create a new folder, call it index.js, and open index.js here. I'm going to give you guys 10 seconds to do it. I think it's simple stuff. For the people who are in Replit, don't worry about anything. Just make sure you have index.js here. For the people who are in Replit, you can actually see package.json is already there for you because npm already has been initialized. So you are fine. If you were here, if you are not here and doing it locally, run npm init-y. You should see package.json. You should see index.js. What is the goal, Harkirat? Is it to read a file? I will write some code to read the file. Const fs equal to require fs.read file. Is this the goal, Harkirat? No. What is the goal? It is to create an HTTP server. Harkirat, how do I create it? Do I write some code? I don't know, const HTTP equal to create? No. You defer all of this to smart people who have written libraries. What is the library we're using? Express. So rather than doing const fs equal to require fs, what will you do? Const express equal to require express. Just write this line of code to import a very famous library called Express. Harkiyat, where does this library exist? Somewhere in something called the node like package registry. Don't worry about what it is. Some smart people have written it, some smart people have deployed it. One small difference between Express and FS is that this comes built in with Node.js. You just have to require it. This you will have to bring from the internet to your machine. Question is, how do you do that? And the answer is you run another command called npm install express. What is this command? It says, please bring the express command, the express library locally to my machine. You need to run this command. Only then will you be able to import express. Else you wouldn't have the code base of express locally. So you won't be able to actually import or do anything with it. It will basically error out by saying express not found. If you're on Replit, copy, paste, and in the console, in the shell here, run npm install express, and that should do the same thing. So it's installing it here, and hopefully it has been installed here for you. Okay. Now we're going to write some code as to how you can create and expose an HTTP server. Const app equal to express. Harkiyat, how did you know you have to write this? Just Google express hello world and look at a hello world code base. You can actually just copy this over. You don't even have to write anything. Just copy this over. We will eventually see what this is, how it runs, everything. Copy and paste it here. Replicate here wherever you want to. Now make sure you don't have this. So the first line should be this. Second line should be this. Then some code, then some code. Very, very jarring. What is this arrow function, Kirat? Great question. Let's convert it into a normal function. Put function here and remove these arrows. Same thing for this guy. Remove the arrows, put function here. Slightly better. What code have I written? Require express. Ignore this. Never mind. Let's keep it, but ignore this for now. App.get slash function this. What is this? This is similar to fs.read file, path to the file, encoding, comma, some callback function. When did this callback function run? Anytime the file was read, at the end of the file being read. When would this callback function run? Whenever anyone would try to hit your backend server, control will reach here. Harkirat, how will it reach here? Don't worry about it. That is what these folks have written. The logic to actually bind to a port has been written by the folks at Express. You are just using their high level APIs to create your application specific logic. For example, if you were the ChatGPT developer, you would write something like this: app.post slash backend dash API slash, whatever the route was. What was the route? Give me 1 second. What was the ChatGPT route? It was, there we go, slash backend API slash conversation, a post request. So the ChatGPT developer would write app.post slash backend API slash conversation. Here he would run a machine learning model. And then finally, res.send means what are you responding back with? Which right now we're just responding back with a simple hello world. Two endpoints have written. You don't have to write the second one. Just this much is good enough. You have created an HTTP server that is listening on port 3000. Because after you expose this, you also do a app.listen on this port, and then another callback function you send, which even if you don't send, it is fine. Just try to marinate these 8 lines of code. This is how you write a simple backend Express HTTP server in Node.js. Save it, and the same thing you can just write on Replit as well. So just paste it here, and then try to run it on Replit. And if you're locally, then try to run the command node index.js here. And you will see an error. One line I missed here, which you may or may not have missed, which is const app equal to express. Hopefully you already saw this. Make sure you have this line. This is what initializes an instance of express. This isn't really a class. This is a function. This function returns something, the app object, and this is what you do a .get, .listen, .post on. Harkirat, what is this app object? It is something. We can dive deeper into the code base of Express if you want, actually look at how Express does what it does. For now, for this class, we will simply use it as a black box. This library lets you create an HTTP server, which is what I did right now here. I'm going to copy this and paste it here as well. Make sure you have this line of code and run it. And this starts a website for me. And it says, if you're going to slash, you get back hello world, which means whenever I went to slash for this website, control reached here and hello world was returned back, which is what the browser shows. Can we do the same thing locally? Yes. Look at this. Run node index.js. Go to localhost colon 3000. Harkirat, what is localhost? What is 3000? We will get to. But try to go here and make sure you see hello world in your browser. This is how you create a simple HTTP server. Oopsie daisy. Everything else is just masala on top. You put more logic here, you run a machine learning model here, everything else. You change this get to post. 100 different things. This is a basic HTTP server in Express in Node.js. If you understand this, you're already, iske baad, what you need to understand is how to write application specific logic. How do you write a social media app? And one other thing you need to understand is databases. But if you understand this, you can very easily deploy this on the internet as well. And you can send your friend a URL that says, app.100xdev.com, and your friend will get back hello world. And if you change something to something funny for your friend will see something funny here. Cool. Any questions related to this? Are you stuck anywhere currently? Slow. Okay, great. For the people who are saying it is slow, I would urge you to do one thing at least, which is create a to-do app that lets users store to-dos on the server. Figure this out. And I'm going to do the same. Say, if let's do a poll, if 90% understand this, then we are anyways going to, now get a little bit into databases. If this is like very easy and clear, might discuss a little bit about Postman and methods, but high level, if you understand this, then things are very, should be smooth from here. But the number is not 90%, it is actually 81%. So the people who do understand this, please proceed and do this assignment, and then you're pretty much sorted for today. Let me see if I have a better assignment for you, which is, see, you can try this. It is hard, out of scope for the cohort. Try to create a HTTP server from scratch in C, or create an HTTP server in Rust using Actix Web, or create an HTTP server in Golang using the Gorilla framework. Just how Express or whatever do Spring Boot Java. You will see that in the end, the protocol remains the same. The logic remains very similar, and you have handlers here that handle a request, and you receive requests from out in the world. The one thing you will notice in Java or Golang is that, your thread will get blocked at time. Let's say I put something here. Let's see, what do I put? Put like a database call here. I mean, if you understand this, put a database call here and see how this might be better. Node.js might be better than Java until you introduce like some multi-threading in Java, or even Golang until you introduce like some subroutines in Golang. So try to, basically have fun. If this was easy. For the 20%, I'm going to open chat. Anything specific that is stuck, that you're stuck with? Let me just go back to the slides and see if they're missing something. The only thing we're missing after this is Postman, which we can get to eventually. Today, after this, I'm going to just create a simple to-do application and create a mockish database, like store data in a file, and let users get data from that file, things like these. Maybe discuss a little bit about methods. That's it. That's all for today. If you understood this, feel free to drop off. Going to open chat now. For the person who is seeing this error, put function here. You're seeing an error that says something like this. यहाँ पे just put function here. In case you've removed the arrows from here, also put function here. Harsh Sharma, sure, this is a break. Since Node.js is not a language, a runtime, you said, how do you create server using it? Who said that only JavaScript is the language? Node.js is the runtime. You can use this run. Okay. And to answer your question generally, JavaScript is not what creates the HTTP server. Express actually uses C or C++, one of these two under the hood, that actually create an HTTP server. This is just a high level, API in JavaScript on top that lets you create an HTTP server. But 99%, I think, Express uses C or C++, or that's what I read at some point. I could actually be wrong on this, but at a high level, JavaScript lets you, write for loops. This is what the ECMAScript standard supports. JavaScript runtime lets you compile this code, also gives you some fluff on top, which includes reading from files. And actually that might be what, no, so I was wrong. Express is probably not written in C or C++. It also gives you like an HTTP module. You can actually search this Node.js HTTP module. And this is what Express might be using under the hood. So whoever wrote Node.js said, I'm going to write an interpreter for JavaScript. I'm also going to write, this might use C++ under the hood. HTTP module, this module uses HTTP under the C++ under the hood that actually, binds to a socket on your machine. But you just have to write JavaScript code that at a high level uses this HTTP library. So there's another HTTP library that you can use that Node.js provides you out of the box. So you can actually just do this. And that will also let you create an HTTP server. Express is written on top of this HTTP library, 99%. If JavaScript is single-threaded, but Node.js manages multiple requests, how can Node.js handle multiple requests efficiently? Great question. JavaScript is single-threaded. Node.js, if I send 20 requests, until the first one has completed here, second one will not be able to reach here. The thing usually is, you do a DB call here that takes 1 second. Usually, someone will ask you a question, you will do a database call. The good thing about JavaScript is this database call is asynchronous. So now the thread will handle the second request, and then that will get stuck at the database call, and then the thread will move on to the third request. But yes, if I put, let's just do this, for let I equal to 0, I less than a very big number, I plus plus, let a equal to 0, a equal to a plus 1. If I run this code, the first request will come, reach here, reach here, reach here, keep stuck here. Do you think the second request will get handled? Let's put a console.log here. Request has been reached. Let's rerun the Node.js server. Okay, this is the code. Put it on the right. Let's go here and go to localhost 3000. First time I see request has been reached. And the thing is stuck here, which is why no response came. Let me again open a second request here. Do you see request has been reached log? No, because the thread is busy here. Once it completes this is when the thread will move on to the second request, and I will see the second log here. What does this teach us? JavaScript is single threaded. It can only handle one request at a time, but it is so fast. Like, it doesn't take a lot of time for you to, run anything. Anything that does take you a lot of time, which is database calls, are usually asynchronous, so a thread can do other things. Kindly increase the screen size. As in, get a bigger screen. Okay, I will. Okay. Okay, someone said, can you explain the topics in the upcoming weeks? Because this was all easy. This upcoming weeks might be databases, Postgres and Mongo. Zod might be something you may not know, maybe ORMs. Learn about Prisma. If Express means, global classes, you're good. Maybe read a little bit about serverless. Monorepos might be something that will overwhelm you. OpenAPI spec. Yeah, that's it. Basically, the syllabus, everything you see on the left, that's not related to the front end, you can go through. What is the difference that you told between FS and Express? Oh, they are significantly different libraries. What is the purpose of the FS library? Naam mein hi, the name itself is file system. Purpose is to read files on system, write to files on system. FS doesn't give you a FS dot, get function. Express gives you a app dot get function. So FS gives you a fs.read file function. Express doesn't give you a read file function. They're separate libraries, do different things. This one is called file system, is supposed to read from the file system. This one is supposed to create an HTTP server. Difference between public and private IPs. Oh, great question. To a high level, internet is very big. There are 1,000 million machines maybe today. And the number of addresses are limited. I said, you can identify a machine via IPs, but there are limited IPs, 222.111.3.55, let's say. There can only be basically this 255 into 255 into 255 into 255 IPs. And the number of machines in the world is much bigger than that. So what happens is, I'm in my house right now. All the machines currently in my building have something called a private IP as well, which is basically, this is a router of our building, let's say. Our router might have a public address 1.2.3.4. We individually don't have a public address. This is why I was saying, when you run a Node.js application locally, most probably your friend in Jaipur won't be able to access it unless you're from Jaipur. Your friend in your local network will be able to handle it, or send a request to it, because you all are part of a private network, and you all have your own set of private IPs to 172.33.1.5, and you can actually talk to each other. But if there is one hostel room in a college, another hostel room in a different college, C1, C2, यहाँ पे if I go to 172.33.1.5, it might reach this machine. यहाँ पे if I go to 170, same IP, it might reach this machine. So the private IP basically repeated across various networks, and the reason it's called private is because this subnet में, or in this network, you can access each other's machine by using these private IPs. Public IPs by 100% on the internet, doesn't matter where you access from it, you will reach the same ChatGPT server or Google server. Please tell me something about AWS and Firebase. So we discussed front end and back end. AWS is one of those popular places where you can deploy your code so that everyone on the world can, access it. It basically gives you a small mini machine that you can rent and then run node index.js there, and then also gives you a public IP. So you can just tell your friend 3.1.5.5:3000 to go. That friend request will reach your code and they'll get back something. So AWS is one such cloud provider that lets you do it. Then Firebase is something called serverless, which doesn't have a server. It has a few things. We will discuss this eventually. So a little early for that. Saving on server, do you want us to not use an DB? You can use a DB. We have not reached there yet. I want to introduce that next week, which is why I said, save it in a variable or save it in a file. Can't run it locally. Can you repeat that? Sure. 3 steps. Step number 1, create an empty folder. Go to your file system, create an empty folder. Call it HTTP server 2. You have this empty folder. Go to VS Code. Oh, see Daisy. File, open this HTTP server 2, or whatever the name of your file is. Open. If you have Node or Node.js locally, only then will this work, else it won't work. Click on terminal, click on new terminal, click on open the terminal, and then run the command npm init-y. That should create a package.json file here. Create a new index.js file. Copy over the code from express hello world. Paste it here. And then run node index.js. Make sure you also run npm install express here, followed by node index.js. That should log this on the screen. And now if you go to localhost 3000, you should see hello world. Only 3 extra steps were npm init-y, followed by npm install express. Kindly increase screen size. Okay, I will. What does that mean? Like font size, or should I just get a bigger screen? I guess you're saying I should get a bigger screen. I can try that. Explain the syntax again. I don't think I ever explained the syntax. The syntax of express is कि भाई first call the express function. It will give you back an app object. Now on the app object, whenever you want to create a new route handler, for example, app.post/route-handler or route.app.get route.handler, create a function. And when this callback function will have 2 things, rec and res. Request contains all the details related to your request. What were those details? Headers, body, something called the query parameters I told but did not introduce. I'll introduce it in an offline video. Get all of that, do your math with it, like do machine learning model. And then finally, on res, just call send and send back whatever you want. Hello world. Or if you want to send back JSON, you can do a res.json and send like a JavaScript object back. Okay, name Kirat age 21. And now this much syntax, of course, you have to like practice this a bit. But if you write this much syntax, run node index.js and try to go to /route handler, you will see name Harkirat age 21. I got it back as a JavaScript object. I can actually click on inspect, click on network, refresh again, and it will show me the same thing it was showing me for ChatGPT. Only thing is, this says localhost 3000 because you're trying to access it on your local machine on the port 3000. Harkirat, where does 3000 come from? That is the port that I told Express to listen on. Why do you need port? The same reason someone asked. What if I have 2 HTTP servers? I can run one on 3000, run another one on 3001. And that way, whoever is calling it can route the request to the right process. All right. We are beginner. Things are new for us. Sometimes understand most things. How can we improve fastly? Price. Why Express server process code look very similar to React Create App? I don't think this code looks very similar to React Create App. Difference between HTTP 1, 2, and 3, just the protocol getting better, a few extra constructs that are being added. Frankly, I haven't read HTTP 3 at all. One of my friends is interested who introduced me to it, but no idea what the difference is. Again, just making the protocol better and better. HTTPS versus REST API. So almost very interchangeably you can use. You can use REST API and HTTP interchangeably. Only thing is like whenever you use API, what it basically means it's been explicitly exposed to be used outside a browser. I repeat, whenever usually the word API is used, it usually means that this thing has been exposed not to be accessed from here, the browser, but to be accessed from sometimes, other Node.js processes. It's not necessary that an HTTP request can only be sent by, you know, um, this is an HTTP server. This request can be sent by a browser, can be sent by a mobile app, can be sent by another Node.js process as well. So depends on it really, who is sending this request and what was the question again? The rest is usually when you are saying that this is actually meant to be accessed by other backend applications and not by mobile app and browser. That's usually what API means. Okay. And this goes out using JWT based authentication cookie. We will use JWT first, and then eventually when we use Nextcloth, we'll use cookie. What should we implement in C when creating a server? What should we just a simple HTTP server that can handle the request on a port and get like the body, things like this. All right. I'm going to write some more code here. It's 8:40. Just going to introduce a few things because, make the assignments a little easier. I said a few things. Okay, bro, when you're sending a request, you can actually, you can send a post request. We haven't yet seen how to send a post request from the browser. We have only seen get request. Whenever you send a request from your browser, the browser sends a get request because they're trying to get back the HTML. What is the response here? It is a text. I can actually send back HTML as well. If I go here and I say, bro, on the slash endpoint, return b tag. Hi there, slash b tag. And if I refresh, also rerun the process. Make sure you're rerunning the process, else this will boggle your head too much. Okay, bhai, why is this not running? Make sure you exit. If you change anything, restart the process. Refresh. Hi there, and it is bold. So my backend can actually return back HTML as well, and this will interpret it. That is one thing I wanted to share. The other thing was I said you can also send post request. And also, whenever you are sending post request, people can actually send some data along. For example, on ChatGPT, when I was sending some data and pressing enter, in the request, there was a body going out, payload. And here I was actually sending the, ASD message, the thing that I pasted here. How can I send that from the browser, Kirat? And how can the other side receive it? Great question. We will get to how you can send it from the browser. For now, I would urge you to download this app called Postman that will make your life a little easier over the next few weeks. Download it locally. Feel free to do it after the class. And once you do, you will see something like this, which I shouldn't show because I was trying something before. Let me stop my share and then try to clear my history before I trying to hack something. Didn't really work out well, but let's see. Okay, good to go. When you download Postman locally, okay, when you download Postman locally, it gives you such an interface that lets you send requests, just like a browser lets you send requests. Here, you can also like somehow send requests internally, just how ChatGPT might be sending it. When I click on this button, internally a request goes out. Let's not worry about any of these requests. Postman lets you send requests. So I can actually go here and go to localhost host colon 3000 slash, I guess that's good enough. Select get here and send a request. And it gives me back the HTML that the server returns. So this is an easy way to test post requests, put requests. And this is like a good list of the kind of requests that you can send. And again, each one of them has a different meaning. But again, as I said, it depends on you as the application logic developer. If you want to write the backend code that looks like this, app.get slash, and then app.get, whatever. conversations, you can do that. Let me introduce one last thing. How do you handle a post request? And more specifically, how do you handle the body of a post request, or maybe the headers of the post request? How do you get them to, do authentication, things like these? And then we'll do a doubt session after that. Cool. I said send a post request to conversation. And let me restart the server. If I send a post request to /conversations, let me put this on the left. Then it gives me back hi there. Let me change this to whatever. Message 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. Let me restart. And then this gives me back message 2 plus 2 equal to 4. It gives me back a JSON. Now let me send some data. Let me first send headers. This has a headers section. You can send a bunch of headers. The one that we were talking about until now was the authorization header, where I said, you send some data. So authorization, let's make it something random, 123, 123, 123. And then here, let's try to access it in rec.console.log, rec.headers of authorization. Oh, oopsie daisy. This thing. Rec.headers of, let me just log rec.headers. That will give you an object that logs all of the headers that I am sending here, which there are too many. Let me send them. Let me also restart my server. Feel free to try this after the class as well. As you can see, bunch of headers I receive here. And the one that we're worried about is authorization. So let's see if we get it. We do get it. Authorization 123, 123. Here it became small a. Yes, they do get padded down to small a. So even if you send big A authorization, it becomes small a here. But this is how I can access, rec.headers of authorization is how I can access the input that the user is giving me. I can do token checks here, okay, whether or not this user actually has access to this resource or not. And similarly, body, which is where you actually send, message, what is 2 plus 2? This is again the client side. It will send the request. How do you get the body here? This is where things will get a little tricky. I will urge you to just bear with me a bit, and then next week or in an offline video, I'll cover something called middlewares that will make what I'm going to introduce a little bit easy to understand. Rec.body. What did I log here? Rec.body. I said whatever the body user is giving me, hopefully there is a good chance that that is present in the rec.body variable. Restart the process, send a request, and what gets logged? I did not save the file. So let me save the file, restart the process, and send it. Undefined got logged, which means rec.body is undefined. Even though I have sent the body, what am I missing? Is body not the right key? Maybe it is bodies, or is it something else? Google it. I will tell you by the end of the class, but try to Google it. This is where I'll call it and ask questions. And in the end, I will explain how to fix this. But try to Google it, see what it tells you. What is the reason for you? I cannot access rec.body here, and how can I fix it? Until then, going to open chat again. And any questions related to things that we've covered until now? All right. Tasks again. Tasks were create a simple HTTP server in C from scratch. Create a to-do application where you store data in a file. Create a Rust/Golang/Java HTTP server. These are the 3 assignments. Dedicated video on Postman. Sure, but it's very simple stuff, but sure. Considering today's okay. I will answer like high-level questions at the end. Going to answer questions related to this. When does changing the port, it doesn't work? You are saying are you sure the port variable is being passed here? If you change this to 3001 and you restart the process, most probably you're not restarting the process, then you will have to, hit 3001 only. And only then you'll get a response. If I now hit 3000, gives me back nothing. But if I hit 3001, gives me back some data. So what does this tell you? You change this port where the application is being hosted. It changes provided you are restarting the process. Why Express is used instead of others? No, it is not really used today. Next.js has become popular, but Express is the first one you start with on Node.js. Can you explain how is this Express code writing HTML code? Because at the end, the result is being rendered with HTML and being displayed on the web. Great question. Express is simply returning back a string. B either /b, or even you can put whatever you want here. It is just a string. It is the browser that thinks कि यार what came back looks like HTML. So the browser says कि भैया if what came back looks like HTML, let me sorry, get slash, let me render it as HTML. So if you look at the request, it still gets back this text only, B either B, which is what we sent from here. The browser is like this looks like HTML, so it renders it that way. Is port keyword? Can we use some? You can use something else. You can remove this. You can simply paste 3000 here, 3001 here. It's not a keyword. Overwhelmed with just this much, sir? It's literally 5 lines of code. Let's see. I mean, the thing is like, if you understand this much, iske baad writing applications isn't hard after you understand databases. After this, the only thing you have to understand is databases. If you understand databases, then your life is sorted after that. But let me do a poll if you're overwhelmed, just to make sure everyone's doing well. Maybe on the side also. Answer a few questions. Relaunch poll. Okay. Why do you always say locals 3000 / transfer at the top of Postman? Why does it say locals 3000 / transfer at the top of Postman? Okay. 20% are still a little low. Koi chinta nahi. I am here and we have a lot of time. Going to answer all the doubts. Would be great if you can just give me specific doubts. Okay, this seems like a problem. I don't understand. Okay. Where is slash here in locals 3000? Great question. Even if you don't pass in slash, it is interpreted as slash. Let's see. Let me restart this. Save. Restart. Run. This and this lead to the same thing. Similarly, if I do a slash ASD here, I can go to slash ASD, or I can go to slash ASD slash. Both will lead to this only. So an extra slash at the end basically cancels out. Any server that is giving back response to front end and back end can be anywhere, not specifically US. It can be anywhere. Just the example I took, it can be anywhere. If you go to AWS, you will see various data centers. You can pick a data center in India, US, wherever. Right now, I have 2 machines, both on the same Wi-Fi. RAN Express is in one of them. Please do tell how can I hit the other machine. Done, sir. I have my phone. There, it is on the same Wi-Fi as this laptop right here. I am running something on port 3000 on my laptop. I am going to go to my terminal and run this command, ipconfig. Now, this might be different based on your operating system, but I ran some command that gave me my private IP. Now, this is something you will have to find. If config is one such way. Here, I see a bunch of IPs. Let's see my Wi-Fi IP. A good way to do that is just search for 192 or 172. I hope you guys can see it. Let's see. I mean, one thing I can do is just 1 second. It's very, I mean, I can find it by my naked eye also, but we have AI these days. So can you give me my private IP from here? All right, there you go. 192.168.1.3. 192.168.1.3 : 3000. I'm going to write this in my phone and press enter. And what do I see? What was the route? AST. Let me remove that, make it slash. And now if I refresh this, what do I see? Hello world. Where do I see it on my phone? What is the IP at the top? 192.168.1.3:3000. Harkirat, will this be the same for me? No, it will be your private IP. And you have to make sure you're on the same Wi-Fi as your phone. And you have to make sure you don't have a restrictive network. But if all of this is true, you can. If I directly search your website on IP in Chrome search bar, can I access the web page then? I tried to, but I could not access it. Why? If I directly search the website's IP. Yes, great question. The question is, Harkirat, this is your website. app.100xdevs.com. If I ping its IP, I get back this IP. I try to access this. I don't see your website. What is happening? I see something else only. Good question. The answer is this. The IP that you see, the benefit of domain names is one more benefit of domain name than the other it provides is okay, you can have a single server. On this server, you can be like, bro, iski IP is 72.1.1.1. If a request comes to this server from Harkirat dot 100xdevs.com, this points to this IP. And the server, whenever you go to this URL, can actually in the headers only figure out who the referrer was. So basically, one of the headers that your browser adds is this thing called referrer. If I go here, if I go to app.100xdevs.com, if I press enter here, look at the network tab, you see amongst the headers that went out, request headers, authority, app.100xdevs.com, there should be a, I'm trying to hide my cookie here, which will basically, expose the thing that I don't want to expose. Referrer. Okay, let me stop sharing here. Okay, you can see the referrer. One second. I don't see the referrer. But basically, there's a header here that says this request came from app.100xdevs.com. This IP, the Vercel IP. Okay, let me ping this. Harkirat.classx.co.in. This is on a different server. There are multiple basically URLs that you can find that point to this Vercel IP, which in the end points to a single server only. So you're saying, Harkirat, Vercel has a single server, not exactly, but very close. It has a single load balancer usually, or a bunch of times high level. Yes, it has one machine. Harkirat.100xdevs.com points to this. Some random guy .google.com might also point to this. Both have the same IP, 2.2.2.2. But when the request comes here, the backend checks, did it come from here or here? And based on that, sends the request to the right place. So if you try to access the IP directly, the backend will be confused. Where does this request come from? High level learning is a server can host multiple applications and multiple domains can point to the same server. And whenever a request comes, the server can check, this request came from harkirat.classx.co.in or this request came from something else. So that is why you can't directly access it on the IP of that specific sort of that you saw when you pinged app.100xdevs.com. Give us an option to remove your face stream so we can put it in full screen in Zoom. Let me see if we can figure out. Let me ping Rookie here. I'm a little dumb when it comes to Zoom, but and okay. I always forget Rookie's real name. Check if my face can be removed from Zoom. Apparently, people don't like my ugly face. Sad emoji. Okay, continue. Give a okay, हो गया ये तो यार दो बार नहीं. Good to check fetch XSR options in network tab. Capture only API calls. Okay, someone said if you want to just capture the API calls and not a bunch of fluff like images, just check this option and then that'll just give you the API requests versus everything, because this has like images requests, a bunch of other requests. Is there anything better than Express.js? Can we use Nodemon for automatic requesting? Yeah, you can use Nodemon. Is it better than Express.js? Yeah, there are a bunch of new frameworks now. There are 1,000 frameworks. It depends on what you want right now. Can you explain more about the listen? Can you listen on multiple ports? So a single process can only listen on a single port, basically. Actually, it's not true. Let's see. I mean, so listen basically is I am going to take over this port of this machine. What is the port of this machine, Harkirat? This is my Mac machine. My Mac machine has a bunch of not exactly ports. Like, it's not a physical port exactly, but a logical port. कि हाँ भैया logical port 1 2 3 dot 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 until some big number. I think 25565 something like that. And every process can be like I am taking a certain port. Any request that's coming on this port, I will handle. So if I actually try to run the same node index.js in a different terminal, as you can see, it says unhandled error, address already in use. So two apps cannot access the same port, be it a Node.js or a Java app. And the point of a port is that bhaiya, one process is like, I have taken this port, any HTTP request coming here, I will handle. What you did in the last few minutes, I lost connection. Can you please name the topics? I know Node.js. Oh, we just covered a basic this thing basically, and a bunch of what is Postman, what are headers, how can you get body here. So let me just actually share that finally. Okay, how do you get the access to body? How can I do a console.log rec.body here? So the other thing is, whoever wrote Express, he was like, I will handle post requests, I will handle headers, I will not handle body. I will just ignore the body. If there is under the hood, what is happening? There is this framework called Express, which uses the framework called HTTP Node.js, which says if anytime a request comes, what is a request? It's a bunch of bytes together. And somewhere in these bytes is the body. It says, I'm going to ignore the body. If someone wants to actually access this body, they can use a different library that handles it. Express says, I am not going to. So for this, you can use multiple libraries. The one that we're using is called body parser, BODY PARSER. So this is the library I wanted you to reach by Googling. This library says that bhaiya, Express doesn't give you this out of the box. So let me give it to you. So number one, install the body parser library. npm install body dash parser. Number two, import the body parser library. Const body parser equal to require body dash parser. And now run some code for me now. I will eventually share what this is. This is actually middlewares that we will discuss later on. But you can just write app.use body parser. And give it like empty options. Depreciated. Oh, okay. Is it app.js? Try this, but then it seems like this is depreciated, so we should use something else. But let's try this first. Let's run node index.js in a different terminal. It says depreciated body parser, use something. We will see that. Let's try this. Oh, okay. I think I know what it says. There you go. It says use this. I can use this as well. Okay. Anytime body has some JSON, this guy will extract that JSON and put it here. How it does that is a whole different thing we will understand later. What does use mean? We will see eventually. But for now, does this work? If I run node index.js, go to Postman, send a request to / on port 3000 with some body, which is a post. Sorry, I had to do a few things here. I see message, what is 222, which is what I'm sending here in the body. So for Express to be able to get a JSON body and for you to be able to do things with this input, you have to use body parser. This is the syntax to use it. How this is working, what is .use, I will cover either in an offline video or otherwise. More questions. How can you avoid restarting a server after every change? You can use nodemon. Someone suggested this. So just do a npm install nodemon, or just do npx nodemon index.js. What this will do is anytime you change and save the file, it will restart the Express server itself. For example, change the file, save, you see this restarts. We change, save, this restarts. So it automatically restarts. So just use this command rather than using node index.js command. All right, how link frontend and Express? Like when I press a button, great question. How do I, from a website, send a request here? You use something called fetch. In the browser, I showed you set timeout, which I said is a web API. Similarly, fetch is a web API, which, as the name suggests, lets you fetch data from somewhere. I can actually just show it to you. If I go somewhere here, Let me write some code here. Eventually, we will discuss this very well. But if you just want to see it very quickly, I can just write something like this. Fetch this, comma, method post dot then X. I can keep writing this. Basically, this is it. How Google it a little bit. Write an HTML file. Inside the HTML file, write some JavaScript code. Inside the JavaScript code, do a fetch call. But this is what you use. Whenever someone clicks a button, you would have an on-click handler where you would send out the fetch request, which will give you the response, and then you can do whatever you want with it. All right. You can use ThunderClient instead of Postman. You can do whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable with. You can use Postman correction, like extension in VS Code. Sure. Do we get to work on Postman? All these things you mentioned in open source project, not really. Express is a prerequisite to Next.js. Not really. You can do Next without learning Express at all. Can you explain the server code again? Yes. Let me explain the simple server code one more time. We in the class learned that backend servers are very, you use backend servers to do a bunch of things, specifically to expose a few endpoints that people in the world can hit. I exposed one such endpoint. I said, whoever sends a request to slash, or maybe let's say slash ASD, they will get back hello world from me. This is similar to ChatGPT saying, okay, whoever sends a request somewhere, they will get back the model response from the model. I said it needs to be a GET request. Anyone who's sending GET request to this endpoint, they get back this, ignore everything else. This is the code you need to focus on. This is what you will write more and more for, various endpoints. Everything else is sort of, you can consider it as boilerplate, which is basically this and this. What does boilerplate mean? It means, just code you have to write once. What you really have to rewrite again and again is this. When you expose more and more endpoints, some of them are post, some of them are get, some of them are put, so on and so forth. So basically try to understand this line, which basically says anytime a request that comes to slash ASD, then return them hello world. If I go to localhost 3000 slash ASD, I get back hello world. Difference between Next and Express, yes. So Next is a framework that lets you do both front end and back end. Express only lets you do this. Bunch of other differences as well. This high level is Next lets you write both front end and back end code. This lets you write just back end code. Next is there's a bunch of other things though. What do you last when I lost connection? Okay, answer that. What is utils? Utils is also it's a library that lets you do a bunch of things. I think it's an inbuilt library inside Node.js that lets you do a bunch of things. What is port? It's like not a physical thing. It's more like a theoretical concept. Not a theoretical. What's the right way to put it? Every machine can have only a single IP. Not really true, but for most purposes, assume that every machine, my Mac has a single IP, the IP that I use to hit it. But a single machine can run multiple processes, a Python process, a Java process, a Node.js process. If you want to run multiple HTTP servers, you will have to, define that this one runs on port 3000, this one runs on port 3001. This is a use/benefit of ports. Okay, you can run multiple processes. Each process binds itself to a port. And whenever you are sending a request, you specify, okay, I am sending a request here. Kirat, when I go to google.com, I never specify a port. You don't. But if you don't specify a port, but your protocol is HTTPS, it is the same as going to :443. It just defaults to :443. So if I replace this with :443, it just, gets removed automatically. But there is still a port when you're going to https://google.com. Server and Rust someone created, very cool. Please explain dedicated video on Postman. Okay, sure. But it's like, okay, but like GUI, it's like simple GUI, but I can do it. Where is JSON course? There is some JSON we discussed in 1.2, I think. So feel free to go to 1.2 where we discussed JSON a bit. Week 1, 1.3. Here we discussed JSON. Okay, I answered that. Give us option to remove your face. Okay, answer that as well. Okay, one last set of questions. Let's go. All right. Confusing? This is what you need to focus on. If you understand this, your life is sorted. Let me actually do a poll now. Have things gone better, or are we still stuck? I'm here for a doubt session, so don't worry. But let's see, how is it going? Oh, great. Slowly we moved up from 80 to 85%, 86%, but still few people are confused. That is fine. I'm here. Ask me questions. If you get Next.js directory, what is the significance of learning Express? Well, no significance. I mean, there are some open source projects in Express, some in Next, some in other languages. So significance is that you understand this whole library. But sure, if you want to just, what is the significance of doing anything else? We are covering 100 things. You can do everything with Next.js. Well, yeah, covering more concepts. That's it. Um, how do answer interfere if they say JS is compiled or interpreted? And why is it called just in time compiled? So it is sort of interpreted. Interpreted is 99% correct. But as I said, it goes line by line, right? Line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, line 5. Each line is compiled just in time. इतना ही पता है भाई मुझे भी मतलब if interviewer is asking more than this, whatever is the first response you're getting from geeks or geeks, just throw it out. Just in time compilation is बस इतना ही पता है मुझे कि हाँ just in time compilation means कि हाँ every line gets compiled, so it just gets compiled in time, and that's probably the technically right answer. But if an interviewer is asking you this, then whatever is the standard answer available on the internet, answer it with them. Explain rec.body. Let's go back to the slides. What did I say? Okay, when you are sending, you can send the protocol, address, route, headers, body, and query params. We haven't even discussed query params, but that's fine. Body is, if I go to chat.openai.com, and if I write something here, this text that I've written here, and I press enter, the payload here is the body. And what does it contain? It contains a bunch of things, but also contains this ASD. So it is the meat of the thing that you want to send to the backend, which in this use case, in this HTTP call is the question that I'm asking to the machine learning model. Similarly, if I want to write something like this, let's say I want to write this backend API endpoint in my Node.js app, I will be like, bhaiya, anytime there is a post request to this thing, const message that the user wants me to process is rec.body dot message. And then, I do the machine learning thingy here, run the model, give it the input, it gives me back the output. And then I can just return that output here, whatever, 2 plus 2 equal to 4. The problem is, okay, you don't have access to rec.body of the box. You have to import a library called body parser and then run this line for me, which I will eventually explain what it does. What does app.use mean? But you have to use this. And then if you write this line of code and you import this library, then this is similar to the endpoint we just saw. If I rerun Node.js, nodeindex.js, if I go to Postman, go to slash, send a post request to slash backend API slash conversation and send a message here, enter. I get back, I do get back the output and, I haven't logged it here. The message that I've logged here, I see that message here as well. So whatever the user is sending me, I am able to access here by using rec.body.message. So that is the significance of body. User can send me data, which in case of this request, specific request is what they want the machine learning model to run. Nvim config, go to lazyvim, whatever is the default config, download it. That is what I use. Considering today's dev world, is Node.js production level? Because yeah, I mean, production level depends on the application. Some applications really need to be really fast. For them also, one might be an alternate. But sure, a lot of these trading applications cannot use Node, so they use Rust. But a lot of times companies do use Rust. Most jobs are still in Node.js for full stack. The reason is companies want startups are very lean, want to move fast, so they want to keep a single stack. Sometimes Golang is also very preferred. People rarely go to Rust unless it is a trading application, in which case they have to go to Rust or C. Whom are the assignments for? Is it for us to? Is it for us? Those tasks look hard. I mean, assignments are for everyone. They might look hard, especially the hard problems. But even if the easy ones are seeming hard, then you have to really hustle and code a lot now because you're in your really initial stages. If you are not able to solve the easier assignments. But medium and harder for like, even if you don't do it, it's fine. Can you explain more about rec res? Great, sir. Sure, sir. देखो. Let's make this a little cleaner. App.post is a library that someone else has. It's been created by the founders of Express. They said first route is going to be this. Second route, may I'll have a callback. Callback will have two objects, rec and res. This will have all the request data. This will have all the response information, or if you want to ever send response, this is the object that you use. Similar to if I do const fs equal to require fs and then do fs.read file a.txt utf-8 function. What does it give me? The two things. It says, I will, whenever I have the data, I will give you two arguments. First will be error, second will be data. Similarly, Express says, I will give you two arguments whenever there is a request that comes on a specific port or that has the specific route. I will give you these two arguments. You do whatever you want with them. This will have all the request information. This will give you some high level functions, for example, .json function or .send function that you can use to respond back to this request. So this rec and res are similar to how this guy gave you error and data. Hereby there was an error reading the file. So this will be not null. And this is the data inside the file. This guy gave you this. This guy gave you request and response. Ke bhaiya, any request information you want, you will find here. If you want to send back some data, you will send back the data using this REST object. So that is the significance of these two things. Postman, I'll explain in a different video. High level, it just, okay, different video. Let me write that down. I'm actually maintaining all the videos to create in our, so this is the code base of the website. And if there are urgent videos, I'm just putting them here as an issue. Postman offline video. Okay. What if I start React on 3000 at the same time? Will it render this on that? React won't start. It'll error out. For example, as I tried to run something else on the same port. It gave me an error. It says error, listen, EDDR in use, address is already in use 3000. So the second process won't start. If one process is taking a port, another process cannot take it. If I try to use your local IP instead of localhost, will it give me this? No, unless you're on my house in a Wi-Fi, in which case I should pull out a knife because what are you doing in my house? Then no. That was my private IP. Unless you're in the same, you're connected to my router that's present here. No, you won't be able to. You might get something else that might be running. So fun this thing. In our back in college, there was a domain name blog.sdslabs.co, which this is the blog for internal SDS Labs, which is hosted on such a machine inside the intranet. So it pointed to a private IP 3.5, something like this. I would go to this inside the IIT Roorkee intranet. It would give me the request would go to a server inside our lab because this IP pointed to that, and then I would get back the blog. I went to IIT Bombay and hit the same thing. I got something else because over there on the network, this specific IP was pointed to something else. So hopefully that clears it up. Body parser is to be used to access the request body. It lets you parse the body. So yes, you can say that, but under the hood, a few things are happening. If you want to, feel free to look at the code base of this and see what exactly it does with this request object so that it is able to pull out the body and put it here. Can also use app but use express.json. Yeah, I think you can also do that. You can simply do this and this would do the same thing. 3030 is a port, understood. What actually ASD refers to after this? That is the route. That is not the port. If you go to the slides, protocol, address, route. That is the route. This specific URL pay, and on this specific port, the user is hitting this function, or are they hitting, backend API / conversation to this function? This is the route, which was this thing right here. The port is this thing. So everything you see after this is the route for github.com. What is the port for github.com? 443. 443. This is the port. This is the route. You can set cookies using the same origin. Previously, you could do it with a different origin. What is the efficient way to set cookies in your backend if your front end have different IPs? So yeah, good point. If you want to set cookies and your front end and backend are on different hosts, you can, I mean, there are a few things here. If you really want it to be secure, if you're building a financial application, you don't want, like, there are standard reasons why you shouldn't be able to set cookie from one domain to another domain. For KD projects, it's totally fine. If you're building a very strong application, then you can restrict something called as CORS, like cross origin request, as I forgot, to specific domains. So you will restrict that. Ki, haan, bhai, only set cookie can happen on this domain, this domain. Whenever you're creating your server, also you have to specify, people can set cookies from this different domain. And that's how you can, don't open it up to any front end, but open it up to, 2, 3 places where you have hosted your front end. Can you explain process.env? Sure. So a bunch of places you will see this. You will not see port. Clean this up a bit. You will see process.env.port or 3000. You will see this in a bunch of places. What is this? This is a way for you to access an environment variable. What is an environment variable? Great question, sir. You are running a Golang process, let's say, or a Node process, or a Java process. Environment variables are actually sort of an independent things to this, to what language you might be running your code on. If you set an environment variable in your terminal, or you somehow inject environment variables to your process when you're starting them, you can actually access environment variables inside your specific process. The way to do that in Node is through process.env.port, or like whatever the environment variable is. Let's see that in action. I can actually export an environment variable in my terminal by doing something like this. Export port equal to 3005. Okay. Now, if I start a Golang process or a Java process or a Node process, if they are accessing an environment variable, they will get the value of 3005 in the port. So now if I run this, it does not run on 3005. Bounty time. What am I missing? Chat open. Please only answer if you know. Yeah, don't spam. Okay. If you know the answer, then tell me what am I missing. I said, I came to know what am I missing, but chalo, you tell me. Sir, could you please help us organization issues? GSOC class we will do one class this week. Ha! So funny. ठीक है भाई. देखो, a few people had posted, but we have to pick the first person that we saw. And Sai went the Sai Teja Gorthi. Now, there were network issues. You tried but couldn't put it. I'd say sorry for that. But the first person answer that I see here, who might have a faster machine, might have the right network, Zoom might have preferred them, I don't know. But the first name that we see here, yes, will win the bounty. This is supposed to be port. Now, if I run this, it runs on 3005. If I export 3006, it runs on 3006. Cool. Don't feel bad if you did not get the bounty. I know everyone saw this. Does not matter. Doesn't make you a better developer if you can see a typo. Hai na? So no one's better, no one's bad. Just luck. And it won't be, it will be a very small bounty anyways. Okay. Let's see. We can use express.json, request param, body header explain postman API calls. Great question. Query params is something I missed. We can discuss it very quickly, but I will discuss it in more detail. Another way to send information to your backend is query parameters. I can access rec.query.message. And what does query represent? If I start this runs on 3006, if I go to Postman, I can send a request and be like question mark message equal to 123. This you might have seen sometimes in the URL bar. Question mark something equal to A equal to something and B equal to something and C equal to something. This is just another way to send data to the backend. Hargirat, why send it like this when you can send it like this? Good question. When you're sending a GET request, especially from the browser, there is no easy way for you to, send body here. Where will you write the body? You just have this much URL bar space, right? So you use query params in this case. If you know something is a GET request, 99% of the times, if you want some information from the user with it, you ask them to give it in query parameters, which, as the name suggests, are a bunch of parameters in the query itself. So I might just be trying to, find a meaning to the name, but at a high level, if you send data like this, click on send. If I look at the logs, uh, React.query.message, I log this 3006, enter, and you see 123 here. Where does it come from? Message equal to 123. Okay. What is npm and npx? Great question. Will be covered in the bash video that's coming. But npm stands for Node Package Manager. It lets you bring packages to your machine. For example, we did npm install Express. That brought Express to our machine. npx stands for Node Package Executable or something like that, which basically means if you want to just use the package immediately and not install it, then you do npx nodemon, for example, index.js. I won't get nodemon locally. I will get it like it won't be present here in my package.json. Now, what is package.json? Don't worry about. But it won't be present here. It will be present globally. That is when you use npx. When you want to execute a specific, so usually use for things that immediately execute in the terminal. npm lets you do a bunch of things. Stands for Node Package Manager. Lets you manage packages at a high level. How will frontend know which port to hit on the backend? Oh, you write that in the code base. Whenever you're writing like HTML code, so there is a variable here, in the JavaScript code, which looks something like this: const backend URL equal to local host colon 3001, basically. So you put it there explicitly. It doesn't know. All right. Considering today's dev world, is okay. I answered that. Domain name gets mapped to IP. If we send another request, just like new page, does the IP get changed? No. So I mean, it depends. If I go to my Google domains right now, domains.google.com, and I change the IP for whatever, app.indexjs.com to something else, or this application to something else, it eventually propagates. But and browsers also cache this. So if I change this immediately, doesn't mean all of you will immediately see this change. Some of you will still see the old IP, eventually see the new IP. But unless I change this, you won't see this. You will just see the same thing unless I actually change it from my dashboard. Get versus post, just request methods. Okay, bhaiya, do you want to get some data? You want to post some data? And what are the examples here? Posting is, if I go to ChatGPT, earlier ChatGPT used to show me history here. That would be a get request. If I want to put a new conversation there, that would be a post request. Fetch uses promises or something else, which is a sync. I think fetch is promisified, is it? I think it is. Let's see. I could be wrong here. We can just fetch https google.com then s. Yeah, it is promisified. So yes, are equal to await s dot. I think fetch is promised. I could be wrong. Try this out locally. If this doesn't work, then it isn't promised, and you have to pass in a callback. I think it returns a promise as well. We could use express.json instead of body parser. We can use body parser. The body parser module enables us to parse incoming request bodies in the middleware. Express server needs to know what type of data you're sending over the network, so it knows how to parse it. Okay, this might be a great explanation. Let me also post it here, and this might be a good way to give out bounties because this is some good information I missed. So Mehran Firdaus, you get a big bounty for today, and thank you for sharing this with the class. We can use body parser. The body parser module enables us to parse incoming request bodies in the middleware. Express.js server needs to know what type of data you're sending over the network, So it knows how to parse it. So it seems like the reason Express doesn't by default parse your body is because you need to tell it, parse it as text. I could, body to depends on me, right? If I'm sending a body, I could send it in this format, which don't worry about what it means. I could send binary data, let's say my image. I could send raw non-JSON data like simple text. So you need to tell JSON how to parse it, which is why you need, app.useexpress.json. So great insight, bounty for you, sir. If this gets, okay, let's do a poll now. See if people are still open. If this gets overwhelming, so it's been 2.5 hours. So now, if anything I teach, will go like this only. But with practice, this comes. Create backend servers of your own. That's the high level advice I can give. Okay, okay, it's not great. Well, any specific questions for the 15%, or is it just overwhelming? So just opening chat, but like any specific doubts that can help solve anything, or is it just overwhelming? It'll take time. It's going to open chat here again. So only people who have questions should ask at this point. All right. What are cookies doing in their use in securing an application? Let's discuss that. Let's just let me answer questions of people who are doing simple things. When you say using Node, when you say you're using Node.js in the backend, why? Is it just JavaScript and the runtime and Node makes them different? Only compiler is different in V8 and Node. When you say you're using Node.js in the backend, why? Okay. It is just JavaScript and the runtime is Node. Does that make them different? JavaScript and Node are different. JavaScript is sort of a language specification, a syntax. Node JavaScript can be compiled down in the browser, in the backend, can use the V8 engine, can use SpiderMonkey, can use Node.js. Runtime is sort of an ecosystem. I mean, I don't know what is the best way for me to explain this. Forget all jargon. Practically, if you are worried, if you are worried about an interview question, then we can go deeper into this. Practically, just say that JavaScript is running on the front end, JavaScript is running on the back end, or Node.js is running in the back end, JavaScript is running in the front end. What is the runtime? Happy to discuss more, but practically, do you need it for anything? Usually, 99% of the time, no. Might be asked in an interview question. That's it. Hopefully, that's a good answer. Could be a bad answer. Done for today. That's totally fine. Can you tell what app.listen is listening to? Great question. Sir, is this listening to a song? Is it listening to what does app.listen mean? It means okay, I am taking over this port. Harkirat, why is it listen? Why isn't it dance or something else? That's just how the maintainers of Express wrote it. Okay, bhai, give me all the routes that you want and callbacks for me to call. Give me the port you want me to listen on. I will write the logic to create an HTTP server that is listening on this port. What is a port? It is a conceptual concept कि भैया whoever is sending a request will send it to the IP of this server colon port, and whatever is running on that port currently will get to handle that request. If I start this process on port 3000, then this specific process will get to handle this request or capture this request because it captured this port. If I ran node index.js, it was able to capture this port, which is why any request coming here will go to this specific process. And if the route is this, then it will go here. If a route is something different, then with some random route, it will go to none of the routes. But at a high level, listen means, okay, it's just an API that, okay, you might ask, Akira, what does fs.read file mean? When I'm using const fs equal to require fs, what does read file mean? As the name suggests, it starts to read a file. Similarly, app.listen starts to listen to all requests on the port. Now, how does that happen internally? Why is listening a concept? Why is port even a concept? It's just HTTP constructs. Okay, whenever you're starting a server, since a single machine can have 20 different servers running, each server should tell, okay, bhaiya, this is the port I am taking. If you send a request to this port, I will handle it. Different port, different process will handle it. Slides are all present. Uh, let's see. Mm, Let me stop sharing. I did have them. One second. There we go. Going to post them in chat. Let's see. Okay, it will take time. Go to app. Great. अब बस हाँ भाई enough for today है भाई अब तो बस ऐसे answering questions nothing formal chill. npm has a full form. It's called Node Package Manager. Can you explain a bit about .env files? I think, I mean, we will get to it. This is very important, especially when you come to Docker. So we'll get to .env files. Let's not do it today. I think I can still go on, but like seems like um, that can get overwhelming the first time we're doing it. So let's not do anything else. For people for whom it is getting overwhelming, the goal to focus on is one, go through the video again and understand a few things. Go through the slides. Make sure you understand this express boilerplate code. If this much you can understand, run locally, maybe run on your machine and try to access it from your phone. You are sorted. You are like way ahead of where you need to be. Okay. What is the difference between runtime and compiler? Good question. Compiler kya? G++ is a compiler. Converts code from uh, C++ to whatever binary assembly that you can run finally. The machine can understand. What is a runtime? Very similar. But is JavaScript compiled? No. JavaScript runs line by line. So this is, yeah, you can think of it as a compiler, even though the real compiler in Node.js is V8. Node.js is not V8. V8 is a small part of Node.js. Node.js is a runtime, which means one, it compiles your code. Two, it gives you access to a bunch of other low-level APIs. What are low-level APIs, Kirat? Reading a file, listening to a port, opening a socket, things like this. So it gives you a lot of things on top. It has access to JavaScript syntax. It can convert JavaScript syntax to the other thing. It also has access to your machine. It can also read files on your machine, write to files in your machine. So that is what runtime is. A few extra things technically, but doesn't matter. Does not. JavaScript, Node.js is everything. Node.js is the language that's running. Don't have to get too deep into it. You are now becoming like one of my sisters. जिसको मैंने एक बार CSS सिखा दी थी. I tried to teach her CSS once, and boy, oh boy, why is font not working? Why did you not tell me font क्या होता है? How to get a font? क्या फर्क पड़ता है? You will eventually, a lot of this comes from a lot of practice, and then eventually falls into place. Can we make HTTP server in JS without Express? Yes. There are other libraries that will let you do it. You can also use the native HTTP library. What Express is exactly? Let's see. Let's go to github.com. Express. It is this. If I go to the source code of this in Express, you will see it uses the HTTP library under the hood, I think. There you go. I mean, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't. I do see HTTPS here, but never mind. And we can read through the code base if you want. But at a high level, what is it? What is FS? Oh, I'm not sharing my screen, am I? My bad, guys. Share screen. This is what I was saying. Okay, this is the code base of Express. You can actually see what Express is, but you won't understand it. Even I don't understand it. We can go into the depths of it and understand it. But at a high level, what is Express? What is FS? FS is a library that gives you high level constructs to do file system stuff, read from a file, write to a file. What is Express? Express is a library that gives you high level constructs to create HTTP servers. That is the difference between these two. This is a library that lets you do one thing. This is a library that lets you do another things. There are 1,000 Node.js libraries out there. Each have their own purpose. Specifically, this one's purpose is to let you create an HTTP server. What is an HTTP server? The thing that we discussed throughout the initial part of the class, specifically A. What is an HTTP server? Express lets you create that. The 5 lines of code again. Yes, sir. Express, copy, paste. These are the lines of code. Let's go top to bottom. Just import Express and be like, call the Express function and get it in app. Harkirat, how did you know this? Where does this come from? What does this return? You can actually log it. It will most probably return you an object. Let's log app and see what it returns. It returns you a very big, it says function here. It's basically an object of a class, which gives you a bunch of methods. And one of those methods is get. One of those methods is listen. If you call get on a specific route, what is a route? This thing right here. One of the things that the HTTP client side specifies is that I want to hit this route. This is the thing I want to do on the server. That you can specify here. Okay, by anytime someone hits the slash route, which means if they go to localhost colon 3000 or they go to localhost colon 3000 slash, then the control would reach here. And then you would do whatever you want here. And then return back. Okay, but yeah, this is the response for what you wanted. As I said, this is like a function. What does a function do? Takes arguments, returns something with it. What does an HTTP endpoint do? Takes arguments, message equal to rec dot body dot message, runs a machine learning model on the input, responds back with something. So that is what this thing does. And what does this thing do? If I don't do this, what will happen? Let's say I run the code, but I don't do app.listen. This is the code I'm running. I'm going to comment this out. If I run node index.js now, it immediately exits. Why? Because you defined the routes, you never listened. It's similar to you defined a function, but you never called the function. So why would the function do its thing? So similarly, you never started the HTTP server. You told the HTTP server, okay, when you start, please listen to the slash endpoint and return back this. But you never started the server. This is what actually starts the server. And whenever you're starting an HTTP server, you have to tell, bhaiya, you are starting on this port. So that if you start another HTTP server, you can start it on a different port. So that is what this line does. If you do start it, then, and also you save this and start it, you can go to localhost colon 3000, control would reach here, and then you would get back hello world. You get back hello world. Cool. I think we need body parser. Express can handle it, but the way Express can handle it is this. All right. Can we delay hello world without set timeout here? Without set timeout would be hard. Well, you'll have to busy wait then, create a very big for loop here. You can do that, or you can be like, set timeout function after 1 second, return hello world. You can do that. And then, now when the request comes, you will see it will be stuck for 1 second and then you get back response. Plan for next weeks. Let's see. Database, MongoDB and SQL. Let's finish. Then let's go into DOM and front end a bit. Then we'll come back here. That's the high level of it. Done for today. Cool. It was good pace. Express header again, please. Explain header again, please. Sure. What all can you send? You can send header, body, query params. Where do I send this, Harkirat? देखो eventually website में तो you send it somehow. For now, I'm telling you use Postman to send it. And Postman is giving you a section called headers. You can send whatever header you want here random. Harkirat, how do I send it from the website though? We will come to it. We will come to how front ends can talk to back ends. For now, I'm telling you send it from here. And whatever you send from here to an endpoint, you can actually access in your application by printing console.log rec.headers. And then now depends on you what you want to do with these headers, right? You've logged them, you can get rec.headers.authorization, do whatever you want with it, do actual auth checks, things like this, but at a high level. This is how you can get them. How we use them, we can get to soon. If you want to increment by an fractional value, you would do something like this. I don't know if you can do, you can probably do this as well. You cannot do I++, but you can do something like this. Either this or this. App is an object. So you can log it and you can see. You can also do like console.log type of app. And that will give you the type of app, which it says a function. Let me create a class here. Let me confirm what I'm saying here. New class, constructor, const, obj, new class. And then what is the type of obj? Oh, it is an object. Although this, now it says it's a function. This is most probably not true. But yeah, I mean, it says it's a function here. We can actually go inside Express and maybe see what it returns. Now this is the type. Let's see what this returns from here. GitHub.com. I mean, I can get into the depths of it if you want. The answer question on the side. How to send status code? Great question. When you're sending res.status 401 dot send whatever. Now if I restart and I go to Postman, go to localhost 3000 and slash, and I get back a status code of this thing. Let's make it a get. I get a status code of 401 unauthorized. Why? Because I sent 401 here. Okay. Let's see. Done for today, me, sir. Thank you to Nistesh. Right. How no differentiate between multiple requests on the same port? Why does Node need to differentiate? It just needs to know. I mean, it gets the remote address. I guess. Okay, good question. It gets the remote address. It knows the request is coming from XYZ place. It can maintain different uh, variables and understand. Yeah, this request come. Even if the same requests, same person sends 10 requests, it can differentiate and call the callback with different tricks and responses. Could you tell what application is listening to? Great question. It's listening to a song, sir. It's a Punjabi song by Karan. It's listening on a port. So, bhai, port kya hota hai? Is a very good question. Okay. Port is basic. And there's no easy answer to this. Let's see what ChatGPT tells us. Okay, what is a port on a machine? Machine. Why do we need it? Serves as an endpoint for communication. A better way to put it. ऐसे करते हैं. My phone has, I can in two ways receive messages from people. Either I can receive a call or I can receive a message, or I can receive a WhatsApp. There are three ways people can talk to my machine. Similarly, a port is one way for someone to talk to your machine. If I have three different Node.js processes running, port one, port two, port three, then people can, hit it on different endpoints. Localhost 3000, 3001, 3002. So that is what a port is. As you can see, it says a port on a machine in the context of networking serves as an endpoint for communication. It is a virtual point. It is not a real port somewhere. It is a virtual point for network start. Communication starts to end. Uh, Ports are software based and are used by computer operating system to manage network resources. Hopefully this helps a little. Let me know if it does not, but I don't have a better explanation. I'll just defer to ChatGPT after this. Okay. What's the difference between requiring import? Import is a better way to do it. We will get to it when we get to TypeScript. It's a little hard to use imports in just JavaScript code. You have to update the version of ECMAScript. But at a high level, cleaner way to do it, better way to do it, we will get to it when we go to Express. Sorry, TypeScript. What is RPC? It stands for Remote Procedure Call. Basically, can think of it like an HTTP call only, a remote procedure call, calling a function remotely on a different machine. Is ChatGPT backend built on Node.js? No, I don't think so. I think it might be how to run Python is a good thing. If it was written on Node.js, how would you run Python from it? You would probably do something like you can spawn a Python process. So you can be like, spawn Python a.py, whatever. They are most probably written in Python. If they're written in different O as well. So the thing is, specifically for ChatGPT, you don't immediately get the response anyways. It comes to you eventually. Your HTTP request comes responds immediately, but the actual response is coming to you later on, slowly. So they actually send you data a different way, not through your initial request. So does not matter. But if they had to, they would spawn a Python process here. Okay, good question. Let's see. This is the question. How Node.js handles the request response sync if three asynchronous functions are called for three different requests? How JavaScript responds to corresponding requests? How does it ensure that one response doesn't respond to another one? You have this, let's say, yeah, basically this, right? This is a good example. Okay, I can send three requests. First one, second one, third one. And eventually all three of them get resolved. But this is an async function. You are asking how do they don't get intermingled, right? That's your question. How does this not getting intermingled? Uh, Set timeout. I mean, I'm not getting the best example here, but let's see. Now here also I called sum twice. That will They're both sort of async. The first control will reach here. Set timeout will be like, okay, I'm waiting. Control will reach here, set timeout will be waiting. Eventually, when the callback gets called, how does it not get intermingled? Because whenever the callback is called, this variable is sort of somewhere still in memory, right? If sum was called with this callback and this went out to the web APIs and eventually came back to callback and eventually ran, this function is still in memory somewhere. It knows this callback is for this specific callback. So it will call this and then same for the second one. So that's the high level reason of how the same would happen here. Okay. When I send two results, it only shows, oh, you cannot send result twice. HTTP does not work that way. Once you have responded back, HTTP, it should give you an error actually. If you try to do a rest dot send it twice, you can't. HTTP, the protocol itself says, okay, you can send one request, send one response. Try to send response twice. The second should actually fail with an error. So you can't do that only in HTTP. You can't send back responses twice. Put and a post के बीच में differences. Just to Google it, but high level. If you want to update data, use put. If you want to actually put some data there, which means create a new user, sign up. is when you use post. Okay. Might have to call it here, guys. Been a long day and a long class. Thank you for joining. Let me do a final poll and see how we're doing. And then happy to release more classes next week if this feels weird. Still feels overwhelming, but how are we doing currently? Also do a little bit of practice after the classes. The only thing I would say, all right? Cool. Slowly getting there. Still pretty stuck at 86, 87%. So the people who don't understand, take a breather today. Complete async and Node.js. Let me release, sorry, Node.js, more specifically just HTTP. Let me release another offline video. And then maybe create like a real application, like a to-do application, and then let's go from there. Okay. Let's call it here. Thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully it was an insightful video, not too overwhelming. But I will see you guys in the next one, next weekend. All right. Bye bye. You can contribute to the 100x website after I open source it in probably a week. In a week, I'll open source it. So feel free to.